more than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
SETI's results for 2018 proves our effectiveness as a development partner, placing people at the center of our work and leveraging partnerships and cooperation to transform policy imperatives into action. With an eye on the rapidly changing global context, SETI is innovating to constructively address the emerging challenges and opportunities for the region. As part of our competitiveness program, SETI is designing precise tools to assess assets and capabilities in the productive sector to determine paths towards higher value goods and services. As our flagship program for partnerships, the Americas Competitiveness Exchange on Innovation and Entrepreneurship, the OAS, will continue to leverage good practices and the power of networks to increase trade and investment in the region.
For us, the role of the OAS is very important, connecting countries, connecting governments and private sector, and letting us know what other countries are doing it and how we can replicate that in our countries to enhance development.
For me, who has come here to look at how can we develop our own ecosystem, our own innovation hubs, our own accelerators, I think seeing this, touching, feeling, seeing the transformation, seeing how quickly you made it happen is a testament to what is possible. So I believe all of us leave here stronger than ever.
The Working Group of Experts on Subnational Competitiveness, the GTEX, is our gateway program to promote local economic competitiveness policies alongside municipal and state-level governments, together with the private sector and academia.
Este tipo de reuniones te sirven para darte cuenta de todo lo que se está viviendo en América Latina sobre los temas de competitividad. Y hoy justamente en este sector estamos viendo sobre todo los temas de innovación tecnológica. Los que si hablamos de competitividad tenemos que hablar de tecnología. Y me está ayudando mucho para abrir el panorama de ver lo que están haciendo otras ciudades y lo que podemos llegar a aplicar también nosotros en México.
The hub on the transfer and commercialization of technology is connecting and strengthening national innovation ecosystems in the region. Each edition of the hub trains budding technology entrepreneurs from the region's public and private sectors to take promising products and services from idea to market.
Porque es importante que estemos juntos en esto, porque la región tiene que estar unida y me parece que hay mucho conocimiento en la región que todavía no está explotado comercialmente como podría ser, y esta es la mejor manera de hacerlo.
Tenemos la proyección de cada año generar y compartir nuevas experiencias entre aquellos que contribuyen a la innovación. Queremos cambiar el cómo lo hemos estado haciendo en Latinoamérica. Queremos generar la unión de los países, queremos colaborar.
Our virtual platform on technology foresight, Prospecta Americas, will support OAS member states in identifying and mapping future trends and technological development of critical importance for the Americas.
Este esfuerzo, el cual viene siendo apoyado por la Organización de los Estados Americanos, nos permitirá tener una gran información para poder mapear estas iniciativas de innovación y poder que ellas contribuyan al crecimiento económico, a la competitividad y al bienestar de nuestras naciones.
Como bien sabemos, nos encontramos ya en la cuarta revolución industrial, la que está cambiando rápidamente la forma en que se hace negocios, se produce, se consume y se genera bienestar y entretenimiento en el mundo. Es la mayor amenaza, tal vez la mejor oportunidad que tenemos en nuestras naciones.
The Inter-American Teacher Education Network, the I-10, is working to improve the quality of teachers with an emphasis on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education. In 2019, the I-10 launched the first STEM Teacher Fellowship of the Americas. The Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas, ECPA, is working with governments in the Caribbean to advance electric mobility and clean transport as the sub-region pursues energy independence. Under our Integrated Water Resources Management Program, SETI is responding to the demand of member states for platforms and applications that enable data-driven policies. In the Central American region, for example, we are expanding the scope of Costa Rica's Plataforma Interactiva de Aplicación del Clima Tropical. This tool captures and disseminates real-time climate and water data, promoting resilient agriculture. The Inter-American Committee on Ports is building human and institutional capacity through public-private partnerships to address port modernization, logistics, and security. CooperaNet, SETI's multi-stakeholder platform for cooperation and partnerships, is being relaunched in 2019, responding to member states' call for a more robust hub for cooperation. In a region where 8 out of 10 consumers begin or end their shopping process online, SETI has entered into a partnership with the private sector.
Es una herramienta que sin duda acerca a las MIPYMES hacia la demanda que hoy está migrando a Internet, y con eso pretendemos mejorar las ventas y el posicionamiento de las empresas pequeñas.
As we look to the future, the Executive Secretariat for Integral Development will continue to leverage cooperation and partnerships to expand our reach, proving that together we are much more than the sum of our 34 member states.
Me and my kids have been there for over an year right now. And children are friends. It doesn't matter where they come from.
Estamos en una zona netamente selvática. La línea de adyacencia va desde el norte hasta el sur, va desde Modesto Méndez hasta Aguas Turbias, tanto en el norte como en el sur. Esta línea tiene 215 kilómetros de extensión.
De allí vino él, se buscó creo con los de la OEA y de allí vino el proyecto para acá, para Judá. Y fue que lo dieron el terreno y lo dieron todo lo que era mano de obra y el material para hacer las casas que están ahorita. Y por ese motivo estamos aquí viviendo todavía.
La misión continúa trabajando en la implementación de medidas de fomento de la confianza mientras aguarda el resultado del reclamo que está atendiendo la Corte Internacional de Justicia por la disputa marítima, territorial e insular. Nuestra oficina en la zona de adyacencia realiza verificaciones a solicitud de ambos gobiernos, facilita reuniones y patrullajes conjuntos entre las Fuerzas Armadas y promueve una cultura de paz y cooperación entre las comunidades locales.
Children will be children. And they have harmony. They don't see each other as a different country, but they see each other that they're growing together.
Hoy, esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos no podemos ser neutrales.
than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
SETI's results for 2018 proves our effectiveness as a development partner, placing people at the center of our work and leveraging partnerships and cooperation to transform policy imperatives into action. With an eye on the rapidly changing global context, SETI is innovating to constructively address the emerging challenges and opportunities for the region. As part of our competitiveness program, SETI is designing precise tools to assess assets and capabilities in the productive sector to determine paths towards higher value goods and services. As our flagship program for partnerships, the Americas Competitiveness Exchange on Innovation and Entrepreneurship, the OAS, will continue to leverage good practices and the power of networks to increase trade and investment in the region.
For us, the role of the OAS is very important, connecting countries, connecting governments and private sector, and letting us know what other countries are doing it and how we can replicate that in our countries to enhance development.
For me, who has come here to look at how can we develop our own ecosystem, our own innovation hubs, our own accelerators, I think seeing this, touching, feeling it, seeing the transformation, seeing how quickly you made it happen, is a testament to what is possible. So I believe all of us leave here stronger than ever.
The Working Group of Experts on Subnational Competitiveness, the GTEX, is our gateway program to promote local economic competitiveness policies alongside municipal and state-level governments, together with the private sector and academia.
Este tipo de reuniones te sirven para darte cuenta de todo lo que se está viviendo en América Latina sobre los temas de competitividad. Y hoy justamente en este sector estamos viendo sobre todo los temas de innovación tecnológica, pues que si hablamos de competitividad tenemos que hablar de tecnología. Y me está ayudando mucho para ver el panorama de ver lo que están haciendo otras ciudades y lo que podemos llegar a aplicar también nosotros en México.
The Hub on the Transfer and Commercialization of Technology is connecting and strengthening national innovation ecosystems in the region. Each edition of the Hub trains budding technology entrepreneurs from the region's public and private sectors to take promising products and services from idea to market.
¿Por qué es importante que estemos juntos en esto? Porque la región tiene que estar unida y me parece que hay mucho conocimiento en la región que todavía no está explotado comercialmente como podría ser, y esta es la mejor manera de hacerlo.
Tenemos la proyección de cada año generar y compartir nuevas experiencias entre aquellos que contribuyen a la innovación, Queremos cambiar el cómo lo hemos estado haciendo en Latinoamérica. Queremos generar la unión de los países, queremos colaborar.
Our virtual platform on technology foresight, Prospecta Americas, will support OAS member states in identifying and mapping future trends and technological development of critical importance for the Americas.
Este esfuerzo, el cual viene siendo apoyado por la Organización de los Estados Americanos, nos permitirá tener una gran información para poder mapear estas iniciativas de innovación y poder que ellas contribuyan al crecimiento económico, a la competitividad y al bienestar de nuestras naciones.
Como bien sabemos, nos encontramos ya en la cuarta revolución industrial, la que está cambiando rápidamente la forma en que se hace negocios, se produce, se consume y se genera bienestar y entretenimiento en el mundo. Es la mayor amenaza, tal vez la mejor oportunidad que tenemos en nuestras naciones.
The Inter-American Teacher Education Network, the I-10, is working to improve the quality of teachers with an emphasis on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education. In 2019, the I-10 launched the first STEM Teacher Fellowship of the Americas. The Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas, ECPA, is working with governments in the Caribbean to advance electric mobility and clean transport as the sub-region pursues energy independence. Under our Integrated Water Resources Management Program, SETI is responding to the demand of member states for platforms and applications that enable data-driven policies. In the Central American region, for example, we are expanding the scope of Costa Rica's Plataforma Interactiva de Aplicación del Clima Tropical. This tool captures and disseminates real-time climate and water data, promoting resilient agriculture. The Inter-American Committee on Ports is building human and institutional capacity through public-private partnerships to address port modernization, logistics, and security. CooperaNet, SETI's multi-stakeholder platform for cooperation and partnerships, is being relaunched in 2019, responding to member states' call for a more robust hub for cooperation. In a region where 8 out of 10 consumers begin or end their shopping process online, SETI has entered into a partnership with the private sector.
Es una herramienta que sin duda acerca a las MIPYMES hacia la demanda que hoy está migrando a Internet, y con eso pretendemos mejorar las ventas y el posicionamiento de las empresas pequeñas.
As we look to the future, the Executive Secretariat for Integral Development will continue to leverage cooperation and partnerships to expand our reach, proving that together we are much more than the sum of our 34 member states.
Me and my kids have been there for over an year right now. And children are friends. It doesn't matter where they come from.
Estamos en una zona netamente selvática. La línea de adyacencia va desde el norte hasta el sur, va desde Modesto Méndez hasta Aguas Turbias, tanto en el norte como en el sur. Esta línea tiene 215 kilómetros de extensión.
De ahí vino él, se buscó creo con los de la OEA y de ahí vino el proyecto para acá, para Judá. Y fue que lo dieron el terreno, y lo dieron todo que era mano de obra y el material para hacer las casas que están ahorita. Y por ese motivo estamos aquí viviendo todavía.
La misión continúa trabajando en la implementación de medidas de fomento de la confianza mientras aguarda el resultado del reclamo que está atendiendo la Corte Internacional de Justicia por la disputa marítima, territorial e insular. Nuestra oficina en la zona de adyacencia realiza verificaciones a solicitud de ambos gobiernos, facilita reuniones y patrullajes conjuntos entre las Fuerzas Armadas y promueve una cultura de paz y cooperación entre las comunidades locales.
Children will be children. And they have harmony. They don't see each other as a different country, but they see each other that they're growing together.
Hoy, esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos no podemos ser neutrales.
more than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
SETI's results for 2018 proves our effectiveness as a development partner, placing people at the center of our work and leveraging partnerships and cooperation to transform policy imperatives into action. With an eye on the rapidly changing global context, SETI is innovating to constructively address the emerging challenges and opportunities for the region. As part of our competitiveness program, SETI is designing precise tools to assess assets and capabilities in the productive sector to determine paths towards higher value goods and services. As our flagship program for partnerships, the Americas Competitiveness Exchange on Innovation and Entrepreneurship, the OAS, will continue to leverage good practices and the power of networks to increase trade and investment in the region.
For us, the role of the OAS is very important, connecting countries, connecting governments.
Siempre silencio.
Estamos dando unos breves segundos para que pueda iniciar el webcast, la transmisión en directo por los canales oficiales de la OEA.
Jorge. Ok, no, nada. Estamos bien. Listo, gracias.
Bueno, buenos días. Mi nombre es Jorge García.
Good morning. My name is Jorge Garcia, and I am the director of the CAJP at the OAS. And we are here with ministers of justice, prosecutors, and at the 11th meeting of ministers of justice and other ministers or attorneys general of the Americas, known as REMJA in its Spanish acronym. We would like to give a warm welcome to all of the ministers of justice, prosecutors, attorneys general, and other guests, as well as to all of the members of delegations here at the 11th REMJA. For Ecuador as host, and on behalf of the Prosecutor General's Office of Ecuador, we would like to give a very warm welcome to all of the representatives of the OAS observer states and civil society organizations that are with us today. as well as those who are following our webcast on the OAS web channel. As you all know, the REMJA process is a technical forum that is at the highest importance of the hemispheric level when it comes to international legal cooperation. We are honored to be here with the Attorney General of Ecuador, Diana Salazar. We are also here with the Secretary General of the OAS. Unfortunately, there have been some technical issues at the OAS headquarters, and there have been some connectivity problems at this time. They are asking us to please move forward without the Secretary General present. He is on his way home right now, and so we are opening the meeting at this time. Also at today's opening session, we have the permanent representative of Ecuador, Ambassador Carlos Játiva, and we are also here with the Secretary of Legal Affairs of the OAS. Without further ado, I would like to read the message of the OAS Secretary General. Allow me to begin by thanking the Republic of Ecuador for acting as the host of this 11th meeting of Ministers of Justice, Prosecutors, and Attorneys General of the Americas. We'd like to give special thanks to the Attorney General of Ecuador, Dr. Diana Salazar, and her team. Also, thank you to the Ambassador to the OAS, Dr. Carlos Alberto Játiva, for his support in preparing for this meeting, and of all of you for the same. This meeting is just one more example of the OAS's work, and it shows that we have not stopped during the pandemic. We would like to acknowledge Ecuador for having stepped up despite these circumstances in holding this virtual meeting, providing any necessary support and enthusiastic participation from the highest authorities. Ecuador's offer to act as host shows just how important justice and international legal cooperation are for that country. That is what REMJA is dedicated to, and we will be hearing about that at this meeting with a presentation from the Attorney General of Ecuador, Dr. Diana Salazar. We have already had 4 years since the first REMJA, and now we can appreciate how this constant cooperation process has been consolidated in this main hemispheric forum for international legal cooperation and justice cooperation. It is also an effective mechanism for true cooperation processes, which is useful and practical when it comes to the competence of authorities in this area. This is an ongoing process between meetings, and it allows us to consolidate legal cooperation. We are using these networks and working with authorities in specific areas to comply with mandates and report on progress made. We see concrete, useful, lasting results for our countries. So I would like to share some of those. First of all, REMJA was formed in 1999, and we created the Center for Studies of the Americas. The aim of this is to consolidate the modernization process in our region's legal systems, and this has been reflected in the contributions of the institution and REMJA in the countries, in understanding the challenges that we face when it comes to justice in the region, and also to support the drafting and execution as well as constant evaluation of public policies in this area, as we will hear from the presentation of the director of CEJA. Secondly, REMJA has consolidated an important forum for sharing experience, best practices, and this has come out of our country's efforts to strengthen their legal systems. This is why dialogue on the use of new technology in international legal cooperation in the Americas is so important, and you will begin to hear today just how important this space is for promoting that exchange. And we hope that you will come out of this meeting with new ideas that will share the best ways to take advantage of new technologies in these countries, but also ideas that will be very useful beyond this. Thirdly, we have been working in REMJA systematically to promote effective enforcement of inter-American legal heritage. And this is represented in various treaties in the framework of the OAS. For that, we have created practical cooperation mechanisms through meetings, networks, portals, and other technological tools and other methods for information exchange and knowledge exchange, as well as training and the creation of new hemispheric level legal instruments. One example is some of the main developments in two areas for international legal cooperation that we work on in REMJA, that we will be discussing in this meeting, such as cooperation in general criminal matters, as well as cybercrime specifically. When it comes to international cooperation in criminal matters, its growing importance is reflected in the 50% increase over the last 10 years in the number of ratifications of the Nassau Convention, which is in the area of mutual assistance in criminal matters. REMJA has consolidated a cooperation process that includes a working group and a legal cooperation network. As part of the working group, we have been evaluating the main challenges in this field. We have drafted recommendations to ensure that cooperation is effective, efficient, and timely, and we have provided periodic follow-up with the implementation of those recommendations. We have also created legal cooperation instruments such as best practice guides for mutual legal assistance and a model law in that area. What's more, in the framework of this working group, we have drafted 2 draft protocols for the Inter-American Convention on Mutual Assistance in Criminal Matters, known as the Nassau Convention. The first of these drafts is with regard to the use of new technologies in communication technologies in video conference hearings, and the second is with regard to the creation of joint investigation teams. As a result of the recommendations stemming from the consideration of this meeting, we hope that the group will be able to enrich even further those draft protocols, given the new circumstances that we are facing today and the greater importance that ICT has to be more efficient, effective, and timely when it comes to international legal cooperation. With regard to the Network for Legal Cooperation in Criminal Matters, under the aegis of the General Secretariat of the OAS, its immense usefulness in facilitating the dissemination of information on legal cooperation in that area has been recognized by our states. It supports their updating, adapting, and maintenance. With regard to international cooperation in the area of cybercrime, we can see more than ever how important this is, given the context of the current pandemic, which has led to an exponential increase. And we now have a working group that has been drafting concrete recommendations. These are practical and effective in order to strengthen that cooperation. Developing this is a way in which we have been supporting the states in drafting legislation in this area. We created an Inter-American Cybercrime Cooperation portal in which we are able to promote the ties between national authorities and the Emergency Contact Network on high-tech crimes. This is available 24/7 from the Group of 7. And we also carry out cooperation activities with the European Council in the framework of the Budapest Convention, as well as other international organizations. It's worth also noting that the training program under the auspices of the United States has been developing in this area, and as of today has held 45 workshops, 3 of which have been virtual during the pandemic. They have trained over 2,500 participants, including legislators, judges, prosecutors, and investigators. And this is in areas such as investigation techniques and prosecution, admissibility of electronic evidence, and drafting laws based on the Budapest Convention. It is also an opportunity for us to thank the United States for its constant and generous financial support to the OAS General Secretariat, as well as for its leadership through its Department of Justice in developing this training program with the levels of practicality and excellence that we have come to know for those of us who have benefited from this very important training program. All of that brings us to conclude that the REMJA process has been consolidated as a particularly useful forum for the development of international legal cooperation tools among the states of the Americas, and we are aware of the challenges that we have been facing in our justice systems and when it comes to international legal cooperation in our region in the context of the current pandemic. This has led us to adopt measures that are not only aimed at overcoming the current context, but also will be useful beyond this. And our work has shown us a lot about the importance of new technology in information and communication and its role in complying with our responsibilities. We need to capitalize on benefiting from these essential functions for our states, including the administration of justice and international legal cooperation. For that reason, I am delighted that the dialogue of heads of delegations for today's meeting will be focused on the benefits of new technology in administration of justice and international legal cooperation with regard to the administration of justice and the use of new technology, as well as the importance of tackling the current circumstances stemming from the pandemic. We need to come out of this conjecture with benefits, bringing justice closer to our citizens, improving our justice systems, and strengthening transparency. Its appropriate use will bring justice closer to the citizens and allow them to more easily access justice systems, have a better understanding of the provisions and procedures that govern those systems, and the ability to virtually interact in the processes themselves. It will also contribute to improving justice systems, streamlining, facilitating, and simplifying the administration of justice, optimizing the management of justice systems, their procedures and activities, as well as their productivity. There is not a shred of doubt today that the use of these online legal services is clear when it comes to communication and conflict resolution among parties, holding virtual hearings, electronic notifications, and e-files, among others, to help in resolving the endemic problem of tardiness that has beset our legal systems. It will also, the appropriate use of technology will also contribute to strengthening transparency in justice systems, facilitating the implementation of automated mechanisms for monitoring processes, disseminating information in real time and with clarity, as well as accountability with regard to the results of compliance with responsibilities, so that citizens will be able to evaluate the objectivity of the application of these laws when it takes place. New ICTs are also very useful tools for strengthening international legal cooperation, as they are the ideal methods for facilitating states' abilities to establish flexible mechanisms for contact, collaboration, and coordination with various authorities when it comes to filing requests for legal cooperation and reciprocal assistance in various areas of law. All of that, along with important aspects in the face of the economic crises faced by our countries as a result of the pandemic, as well as lowered costs involved in ICTs, and allow us to contribute to protecting the environment and reducing the use of paper as well as travel. I am delighted to note that the recommendations for new technologies in the service of international legal cooperation are very pertinent to comply with institutional standards and regulations. And we will also see this play out in areas I have not mentioned in order to not get too bogged down in the details in this speech, but they are no less important. I am delighted to note that we have recommendations aimed at strengthening synergy among REMJA and other cooperation processes under the framework of the OAS, such as the meeting of ministers of public security in the Americas, known as MISPA, and the anti-corruption mechanism in the OAS, known as the Mechanism for Follow-up of the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption, MESISIC, in order to achieve coordination and collaboration that will allow us to mutually take advantage of development and avoid duplicating any efforts. And I am certain that the results of this meeting, in which you will be contributing your own valuable experiences, knowledge, and development, as well as best practices, will allow us to continue to strengthen the international legal cooperation network in our hemisphere. Thank you very much.
As I was saying, because of some last-minute technical glitches, I've just given you his presentation, and because of that, he hasn't been able to directly come to our meeting yet. Following that, we have our opening session, and I'm very honored to give the floor to the Attorney General of Ecuador, Diana Salazar, who will now address you. Attorney General of Ecuador, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Dr. Jorge Garcia. Distinguished ministers, heads of delegation, Attorneys General of the Americas, and other representatives of the OAS, authorities, civil servants, specialists, technical teams, media, and all media, good morning and welcome to the 11th meeting of Ministers of Justice and other ministers or Attorneys General of the Americas, REMJA. The meeting on international legal cooperation is the most important in the Americas. And I'd like to thank the OAS for allowing Ecuador to be the host of this very important meeting, precisely at a time and in circumstances in which in Ecuador we have underway our fight against corruption. These kinds of forums are imperative to strengthen institutions that we have and to administer justice. Because in the globalized context in which we all live, for legal systems to be effective and particularly to deal with complex crimes that go beyond borders, one of the main foundations is undoubtedly cooperation and technical assistance amongst states. And that is why the quest for efficiency and efficacy in these mechanisms and instruments is crucial work as we work hand in hand, and it will allow us as institutions, states, and societies to strengthen our justice systems with full awareness and strengthen democracy and good governance in each and every one of our countries. Along that same tack, then, REMJA has been embraced by all member states because of the importance that it deserves, and it has underscored the topics that it deals with. And we have generated recommendations to use policies in legal affairs, both civil as well as criminal matters. And on the agenda then, we look at issues that concern reciprocal assistance, cybercrimes throughout the hemisphere, and international cooperation on the use of new technologies to benefit legal systems. And on this last point then, the COVID pandemic has truly moved ahead and shown us that we have to double up our efforts to use the digital world for our justice systems. And this is a cross-cutting pillar that we have and will be for this meeting. At the 10th REMJA, held in Bogota in 2015, and the dialogue of which concerned modernization of justice and strengthening of international legal assistance, various topics underscored and left out some issues of abeyance for our nations. And these points could be the starting point for the REMJA meeting. And let me also say and underscore that they will be looked at and addressed in this forum. We have to look at the trustworthiness of our justice systems in lockstep with systems of inclusion, transparency, access, efficiency, and equity. And we have to come up with transparent policies in our justice systems. We have been able to get closer, and in doing so, we can bring justice to our citizens and public policies. We will have systems that are easier to use when it comes to legal systems and also justice integrated centers. We have implemented effective ways to facilitate access for vulnerable populations or those who live in rural areas. They will have more access to justice. To validate the use of new technologies and the administration of justice as legal systems, we have ways and means for notification of electronic experiences, reporting, and we've empowered the use of SEEK for requests, video conferences, and we've also made progress in implementing virtual fora to exchange information among experts when it comes to international cooperation. How relevant are these topics, dear colleagues and authorities? For 6 years, we've been using this forum, and within the framework of the pandemic, we have seen enormous challenges for this sector when it comes to legal matters in our countries. There are various issues where we have to continue to work and promote and use technical ways and means and model laws regionally. This is to support work groups or to put together investigation teams that will allow us to investigate crimes in a transnational way. For Ecuador, it's not an exception to the rule. We've got various pending topics that are crucial so that we can offer dignified access, easy access to our legal systems for all of our citizens. These are challenges that we can overcome more easily, and we will use the good practices of our counterparts, you, and we will deepen our paths of cooperation in legal affairs. Precisely in this framework, the Attorney General of the state, as the entity responsible for criminal matters, has managed and gotten assistance from various states to try high-profile states, and the results of which are well known. Thanks to cooperation and exchange of information amongst our colleagues, we have a lot of information in our fight against corruption at the highest levels. It's unfortunate that the situation in which we find ourselves as a result of the pandemic, COVID-19, limits us to share our experiences and learnings in legal matters along this line as it pertains to each and every one of our states, but I'm quite sure that we'll do our level best so that this will be a very enriching experience, as if we were physically together in Ecuador. We hope to hear more about your own process, your achievements and your progress, as well as to strengthen our ties of fraternity and cooperation, which is the basis that will help us to more effectively fight against transnational organized crime in all of its forms and manifestations. Once again, welcome to all of you, and thank you very much. I shall now give the floor to Dr. Garcia Gonzalez. Thank you very much, Attorney General Diana Salazar. With the message from the Secretary General that I read, we were just informed that he's coordinating things to participating in the closing session tomorrow. And with the comments of the Attorney General, we have now rounded off our opening introductory session of REMJA 11, and we thank you all for your indulgence. As delegations well know, the REMJA process is governed by the Washington document adopted within or at the 7th REMJA, held at the headquarters of the OAS in Washington on the 30th of April, 2008. And in this regard, then, Provision 6 of the Washington document stipulates that once we formally convene a REMJA meeting, the host country will take on the chairmanship, as has been the case now, with Ecuador chairing REMJA based on the invitation to this REMJA 11 in resolution of the Permanent Council of the OAS, CP Res 1167, 17 February 2021. In addition to other things, it offered to the Republic of Ecuador a virtual host for REMJA 11. So along that line then, bearing in mind Provision 6 of the Washington document, I'm honored to give the floor to the Attorney General of Ecuador, Dr. Diana Salazar, so that as chairwoman, she opens the REMJA meeting. Thank you very much. Good morning, distinguished ministers of justice, prosecutors, and all members of the OAS. As we do have our statutory quorum in keeping with the Provision 9 of the Washington document that governs the REMJA process, I am very happy to open the 11th meeting of the Ministers of Justice or other ministers or Attorney General of the Americas, REMJA. For Ecuador, as the host state of REMJA 11, and particularly as the Attorney General of Ecuador, I am very honored to take on the chairmanship of this very important process for hemispheric cooperation. Now let us move on to elect the first and second vice chair in keeping with Provision 6 of the Washington document. And for that, I should like to give the floor to delegations so that they can nominate their candidacies for the positions. The floor is open to delegations. The floor is open to delegations. Madam Chairman, there was an agreement for the vice chair, and we usually do the election in accordance with the procedures. The CARICOM countries have a say here, and this was transmitted to the chair. For the vice chair, this was coordinated in the seeker group, the Central American countries. Thank you very much, Dr. Garcia, for this clarification. Of course, I appreciate that. Carl Bethel, Attorney General of the Bahamas, for the vice chair, has been elected by acclamation. As there is no objection, this has been by consensus and will be so recorded at this meeting. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. It is so agreed then. As to the second vice chair, negotiations are underway, and I'd like to tell you the results later on down the line. Now, we have to adopt the agenda of this 11th REMJA. The first item was distributed as a joint document, which is the most agreed document from the preparatory meetings for this process. The chair would like to suggest that we look at the REMJA agenda up for adoption. As there are no observations or comments, the agenda is so adopted. Moving on, following our agenda items, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Jorge Garcia Gonzalez, Director of the Department of Legal Cooperation from the Secretariat of Legal Affairs of the OAS, responsible for the Technical Secretariat, who will present and give us a background on the agenda of the REMJA 11th meeting. Dr. Garcia, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. From the Technical Secretariat standpoint and the REMJA process, I would like to first and foremost express our recognition and acknowledgments to you, Madam Chairman, for the support and for making this meeting possible. This began in 2019 when you offered REMJA 11 a place and stepped forward as host with other procedures in 2020. But that meeting was not possible because of the pandemic. But even despite these special circumstances in which we find ourselves, you nonetheless ratified this commitment so that this REMJA 11 could take place as we are doing virtually and under your leadership with or as hosts in Ecuador. So please accept our recognition to you and all of your teams, to all of the team members in the Attorney General's office in Ecuador, and in everything that has to do with the preparation and unfolding of REMJA 11. Our deep-seated thanks to Carlos Jatiba, Permanent Representative of Ecuador to the OAS, who very sterlingly managed the REMJA process, which points to its success. We would like to also thank the alternative from Ecuador, Ms. Salema. According to what we have on our agenda, and of course, it's all-encompassing, I would like to very briefly mention some background to the REMJA process. And then, very briefly, following that, I'll make some comments under the leadership of Ecuador through the Attorney General's office and the permanent mission to the OAS, something about the preparatory process for the REMJA 11, all done virtually, and then finally underscore what we have on the agenda for this meeting. Some brief bits and background about the REMJA process. As has been said, the REMJAs are the technical political hemispheric process when it comes to international legal cooperation in the hemisphere. The REMJA project began in 1997 with the first meeting held in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and it was crystallized through the Washington document. This has already been mentioned time and time again, but the Washington document is because of the meeting held in Washington and undergirded the REMJA process. When we talk about the REMJA process, we call it that way in the REMJA, or I should say in the Washington document, because we understood that this process is more than periodic meetings of ministers of justice and attorneys general and general prosecutors of the Americas. In addition to many of the meetings, there are other activities that are part and parcel of this process. Working groups meet, and we come up with model laws, tools, and good practices or other protocols, such as the Inter-American Convention for Mutual Legal Assistance, the MLA. There are other technical activities such as capacity building, cybercrime issues under the leadership of the chair of the REMJA group, and legal cooperation and cyber crimes, also looked at interdepartmental justice and other issues, thanks to the support also of the United States. REMJA supports the reform of justice in the meeting. We've got the JSCA, Justice Center in the Americas, and they continue to carry out technical assistance and capacity building in this area. According to the provisions, provision 3 in the document of Washington, we have the ministers of justice or other ministers, attorneys general, and prosecutors of member states of the OAS who are responsible for international legal cooperation and legal matters. Each and every one of the REMJA meetings has a main topic for dialogue. Amongst the heads of delegation, as a good practice, we circulate a document called Document of Dialogue for Delegations. This is a guide. It's a blueprint that guides everyone on topics that are used in the dialogue. And in no way is it a straitjacket, because there's always flexibilities for the heads of delegation, both men and women alike, to deal with and address other topics that they deem advisable when they make their comments. And then finally, I would like to underscore that according to provision 8 in the Washington document, it stipulates that preparatory meetings will look at draft agendas and conclusions and recommendations of the respective meetings. Bearing in mind, in addition to other things, the background that I've mentioned under Ecuador's chairmanship, through your permanent representation of the OAS, Ambassador Carlos Jativa, 3 preparatory meetings were held on the 26th of March, 9th of April, and 4th of May, 2021. In this regard, then, I should particularly like to underscore that within the framework of these preparatory meetings, first, reports including REMJA 10 recommendations were included. This has to do with the results of the 6th working group meeting on international legal affairs, other points on cybercrime and related issues, and a report from the JSCA. Second, we had a draft agenda that was agreed to, that was presented, which was just approved. And then third, by consensus, it was agreed and negotiated within the preparatory framework, the draft conclusions and recommendations that will be put before this meeting for consideration. And then finally, with regards to the agenda of this meeting, I would like to point out that we will have 2 substantive bits that follow this meeting. And first, let me say that the dialogue between the heads of delegation will be in 2 sections. The first, made up of a host of 5 different introductory presentations for the dialogue of heads of delegation. And the second part will be the follow-up of the dialogue amongst delegations, and that we have envisaged different comments. I would like to say that we've been asked by 3 delegations to make their comments this morning. We've also been asked by the Observer State Spain that a representative of that state would like to come forward and make comments after all of the other member states of the OAS make their comments this morning. And then, secondly, we will look at adoption of conclusions and recommendations of this REMJA. And then, finally, we will have our closing session of the meeting. And as I was saying, the Secretary General, given some of the technical problems that we had this morning, for his participation at the opening, has told us that he will be with us at the closing session of REMJA 11. Madam Chairman, the aforementioned is the information that we wanted to share with you on this point as to the background of REMJA and our agenda for today. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Garcia Gonzalez, for your presentation. We hope that Dr. Almagro can get connected with us. So to continue, distinguished delegations, we will then open up our dialogue for the heads of delegation, which will address the topic of the new technologies for use of legal systems and international legal cooperation in the Americas, policies and experiences when it comes to modernizing legal systems over and above the pandemic to improve and provide justice for people in the hemisphere. In this regard, then, let's begin with the following presentations. They are introductory presentations. First, we have development and international legal cooperation when it comes to criminal matters in Ecuador, and with your permission, I will present. Let's begin then. Development and international legal cooperation when it comes to criminal matters in Ecuador. Today, the topic of cooperation. International cooperation has stopped being a mere red tape or bureaucratic issue to be one of the crucial pillars for discussion and addressing different problems that crop up in our societies. In this regard, then, the transnational approach represents for states and all of their populations a scourge to democratic systems. Without it, we are looking at improving the rule of law. And in addition to that, we have a high level of sophistication and adaptability, which allows all economic sectors that are related to corruption, money laundering, and bank financial transactions. I'm referring to fraud, drug trafficking, weapons trafficking, and so on, to make it necessary to deal with these crimes in a coordinated way. And that's how to crystallize all of the activities and to grapple with all of these criminal activities that can jeopardize peace and security in the region. We have to strengthen reciprocity in our ties when it comes to international cooperation. Therefore, efforts made in this area should address strengthening capacity and the ability of each state to respond, both internally as well as internationally. For this, we have to establish adequate mechanisms to do so. From the legal standpoint, this capacity can be strengthened through binding instruments for all states, such as is the case of our treaties and conventions, or through better mechanisms that allow us to comply with what is established in instruments for legal matters. Given that, then, we are going to take a look at the legally binding instruments for states. Given the aforementioned, the Republic of Ecuador, in keeping with the recommendations both from the universal system as well as the inter-American system, in terms of signing and ratification or adhesion according to the case of legally binding instruments for states, is part of the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption and the Declaration on Follow-up Mechanism for its implementation, the Inter-American Convention on Mutual Assistance in Criminal Areas, and the Protocol, the Inter-American Convention Against the Manufacture and Illicit Trafficking of Firearms, Munitions, Explosives, and Other Related Materials, the Convention of the United Nations Against Transnational Organized Crime and its protocols, and the Convention of the United Nations Against Corruption. Similarly, the Attorney General's Office has promoted adhesion of Ecuador to the Convention on Cybercrime and currently is in negotiations. Ecuador has undertaken different measures so as to make it possible to adhere to and have protocols internally in keeping with the recommendations that have emerged from REMJA. And as such, then, we can point out that we adopted the regulation for the protection system for victims, witnesses, and other participants in the criminal procedures of the Attorney General's Office of the State in October 2018, in keeping with Recommendation 10 of REMJA and as a policy for modernization of justice in the interest of safeguarding our citizens.
With regard to that regulation, recently we reformed our organic comprehensive criminal code, incorporating provisions on reporting crimes against public administration or organized crime. This preserves the identity of the person reporting when requested. In line with the UNOTC, at the end of 2019, we carried out reforms to our comprehensive organic criminal code in regard to searches. Specifically, we added that in the case of a sentence as part of a criminal process, involving illicit enrichment, organized crime, trafficking in persons, or illicit trafficking of migrants, in addition to what was already established as money laundering, terrorism, and financing terrorism, and its related crimes involving substances subject to prosecution, that those goods, property, funds, assets, products, and instruments can if they cannot be seized, then the prosecution will be able to search any other property of the person convicted and seize an equivalent value with the aim of intensifying the exchange of information and mutual legal assistance. Over the last 3 years, my delegation would like to note that we have signed treaties, memoranda of understanding and cooperation with authorities in various countries, which we would like to underscore as the instruments signed with Brazil, Colombia, China, South Korea, the United States, and Spain. The international scenario of the health emergency led us to focus more heavily on the digital submission of requests for mutual legal aid in criminal matters, and that is how the Prosecutor General's office in Ecuador, with the aim of having a international legal framework and as our focal point for the Conference of Ministers of Justice in Ibero-American countries, signed the Treaty on the Electronic Transmission of Requests for International Legal Cooperation among main authorities, that is the Medellin Treaty, and this facilitates the transmission of electronic requests for criminal assistance through the Ibero IT system, and this allows us to provide timely attention to international requests as well as reduce our costs associated with traditional physically sending requests for international criminal assistance. And Ecuador is the first Latin American country to adhere to the convention from the Council of Europe on the falsification of medical products and similar crimes. This provides us with the tools to prosecute this crime at the global scale. What's more, I would like to note that we have committed to strengthening cooperation in the recovery of assets, as well as through our program for technical assistance agreed upon with the Initiative for the Recovery of Stolen Assets. And this program is based on the institutional strengthening and training, as well as on assistance through the regulatory framework in force for the recovery of assets, as well as related draft laws. With regard to this, I would like to also underscore the interinstitutional convention with the Basel Institute on Governance, signed with the aim of obtaining technical assistance in situ in the same area. Now we can talk very briefly about the mechanisms for international cooperation. More specifically, under the framework of the under our domestic criminal framework and international regulations such as the UN Convention against the illicit trafficking of drugs and psychotropic substances, signed in 1988 in Vienna, the UN Convention against transnational organized crime, and also the State Attorney General's office formed part of the first joint investigation team in the area of drug trafficking with Chile, Colombia, and Ecuador, and this was the framework of the Ibero-American Association for Public Ministries. We also have worked on many investigations related to drug trafficking and incorporated special investigation techniques as well, such as controlled drop-offs and spontaneous exchange of information through the UN investigation on organized crime office, UNIDOT, with support of the Directorate for Cooperation in International Affairs, which culminated in the seizure of considerable amounts of drugs that were headed to European countries and in the region, as is the case of Chile. The measures adopted by governments at the global scale in controlling and restricting mobility stem from important efforts in developing our legal systems, which focused on the total or partial suspension of jurisdictional body activities. This led to repercussions immediately in international legal cooperation in criminal cases and made it impossible to comply with diligence in our territory. And that led to new challenges for international criminal cooperation. And we saw that this led to compliance with mutual legal assistance and the use of new technologies. In that sense, we issued directives to prosecutors, giving them incentives to support their investigation with the use of these cooperation tools, such as the exchange of information among competent authorities and spontaneous transmission of information. All of this was under the aegis of the interinstitutional agreement of the Ibero-American Association for Public Ministries. It's worth noting along these lines that the cooperation relationship established with the U.S., which has been strengthened with immediate cooperation among points of contact at the Office of International Affairs at the DOJ and the Attorney General's office. This has led to effective and immediate results in the execution of requests for mutual legal assistance. Against that backdrop, as Attorney General of Ecuador, we would like to salute the cooperation and technical assistance provided, and which is currently underway through the U.S. government through its International Office on Anti-Narcotic Affairs and the INL, as well as the Pan American Foundation for Development. Now, we will focus on international legal cooperation in criminal matters as a means to confront transnational organized crime. REMJUS is an important and effective forum for the promotion and strengthening of mutual understanding, trust, dialogue, and cooperation in drafting policies in criminal matters, as well as responding to fighting new security threats. I'd like to invite you to discuss and exchange experiences, as well as listen to one another mutually among member states on your concerns and issues specific to each of our legal systems, which certainly does have a repercussion at the regional and hemispheric scale. In order to guide our dialogue, I would like to ask you some springboard questions to drive your conversation. The first question is that in the use of legislation for direct acquisitions and taking advantage of the emergency needs that always lead to opportunities for fraud and corruption, we need to quickly find goods and services in the case of medications and medical inputs, as well as PPP, ventilators, and even body bags. So what lessons can we share with prosecuting crimes related to corruption in emergency situations? How can we take advantage of this conjecture to strengthen the fight against corruption in the framework of a broader strategy? Question number 2. The COVID-19 health emergency has stepped up virtual cooperation and activities in cyberspace. This has exposed persistent weaknesses, not only in fighting the crimes that take place, such as hacking and infiltrating or manipulating information, but also in the process of modernizing our justice systems. So, the question is, how can we tackle cybercrime and at the same time ensure access to justice in line with the current reality, ensuring exchange of information is safe and trustworthy? One more question. International legal cooperation must be flexible, immediate, and adaptable. And in the face of the health emergency that we are living through, we need to speak about a system for international criminal justice assistance that works virtually. In that sense, how do you, as heads of delegation, think that this system should work and strengthen itself in time? And so, dear authorities and colleagues, we have the doors wide open to share our experiences, proposals, and best practices in order to feed this space. And I hope that the questions will guide you and serve as a reference throughout today's meeting. Thank you very much. And now we will move on to the second introductory presentation on the importance of inter-American law for international legal cooperation. And I'd like to give the floor to the Secretary of Legal Affairs of the OAS, Jack Michael Arregui. Dr. Arregui, you have the floor.
Thank you very much,
to the Attorney General of Ecuador, Dr. Diana Salazar, dear Justice Authorities of the Americas, participants in this 11th REMJA. We have seen what is happening in Ecuador, although unfortunately we are having this meeting virtually, which will not allow us to share Ecuador's famous hospitality as we were able to do at the previous REMJA in Quito. I would like to note that it has been almost 25 years since the first REMJA meeting held in Buenos Aires, and the reasons that led to its creation are reasons that have become even more intense and necessary today, and we are all part of REMJA for this reason, and particularly in the face of the question that the Attorney General asked about how is it that you are able to work given the immense background in this area. And the Inter-American system was born at the end of the 19th century in order to provide institutional governance and a regulatory framework and network that would allow us to ensure peace as well as the peaceful resolution of controversies and differences in our region, ensure legal security that reaches everyone, and we have overcome civil wars, many different types of legal systems, lack of clear frameworks, and other strife in our region. But with time, we were able to create the international inter-American system to address shared issues such as childhood health, financing for development, human rights, communication, shared legal framework, and others. And it's hard to believe, but this was created in the first 20 years of the 20th century with PAHO, the Inter-American Association for Women, the Institute of the Child, and we proposed an Inter-American Code of Justice and noted the need to create a development bank, which would be created a few years later, as well as the IACHR, CCAD, and other inter-American bodies for cooperation. And what we needed was cooperation in the area of justice. Over the decades, we have also seen increased participation from new states in the system, and this has moved from 21 to 35 member states in the OAS. And we had, with the exception of the US, a system that was almost exclusively continental and civil law, and now we see important participation from more common law countries, and they are participating in many ministerial meetings with their various legal systems and institutions, their own regulations and standards, but with the same conviction that it is only through shared mechanisms that we are able to truly tackle the enormous challenges that we all face. This system that we are building was successful. Certainly, it's hard for us to accept our own success sometimes, but when it comes to relations between countries, we have been, since the creation of the system in 1890 to today, the most peaceful continent on the planet when it comes to relations between our countries. We have major challenges, of course, when it comes to development, respect for human rights, democracy, access to justice. We therefore strengthened our legal cooperation, moving from inter-American law focused on relations between states to inter-American law focused on strengthening institutions and protecting the citizens of our countries. This is how we built a large network of standards in the Americas when it comes to protecting human rights, defending the democratic system, and strengthening various instances for legal cooperation. And the Attorney General mentioned several of these very important treaties that have been adopted. Now, the OAS Charter signed in 1948 noted some of the main purposes of this organization, which included seeking a solution to legal problems that might crop up among states. And therefore, we have a long list of treaties and model laws, which have been used to create this OAS framework. We have conventions from various areas of legal cooperation in criminal areas, civil areas, as well as family law, trade law, procedural law, fighting several types of crime and organized crime. In all, there are nearly 30 conventions, some of which are accompanied by follow-up mechanisms to ensure compliance, such as with the Convention Against Corruption. Others have been established with networks of central authorities or have developed model laws in order to facilitate cooperation with various legal bodies. And let us be honest here, many of these instruments were fundamentally created by Latin American countries, by civil law countries, in which there was not any negotiation from many of the current member states, which come from the common law system. And we need to have new legal instruments that allow us to adapt to those different common law systems. And this is something that we have seen with frequency in the inter-American system to adapt model laws. A convention in itself is not enough in the framework of the OAS. It can be negotiated and adopted, but then it needs to be adapted and incorporated in a national legal system. And this is where we see the fundamental importance of including the ministries of justice, prosecutor's office, and public ministries of other countries as well. We need to have greater international cooperation and the competency to do so. We have other areas in which we have traditionally seen cooperation exclusively from these countries without admitting the difference in international law or that of international organizations, which often fall apart, at least in the inter-American environment. First of all, when it comes to the protection of human rights and then defending democracy. Today, we see shared responsibility for all residents of the Americas, and most recently with fighting corruption and organized crime. When we talk about human rights and democracy, we are including so many elements in that, and there is no respect for human rights or democracy without these elements. And we have seen a lot of effective exercise of rights on the part of our citizens. And that is not possible without central participation from authorities in justice systems and effective cooperation. Therefore, it is sine qua non for us, as we have known since 1997, for us to hold these periodic meetings, and beyond that, to be able to share from these meetings networks for sharing best practices, mutual assistance, and ongoing cooperation by national authorities. And this is what turns our words into actual deeds on the ground. And we hope that this will allow us to strengthen those networks and that we will have the resources necessary to do this. We have seen that the cost of not being able to cooperate appropriately is growing much higher. We have seen that justice authorities note the important ties between countries in our region, and that is why we have been meeting with the highest authorities in Spain, in their Ministry of Justice, as well as the Attorney General's office, as well as those in France, given that the last meeting in Quito had participation from the Ministry of Justice from France. It's hard to imagine today some of the challenges on the international scale that are not only regional but also universal. The last year's experience has been more than enough to demonstrate this. We now staunchly believe and know that this is a necessary step forward in order to build a bridge between various regions of the world. We are all Americans and we share a legal heritage. We are all responsible for its compliance. But we also are all here together with the competence to work together to perfect, improve it through new instruments and ensure that it is effective. This is our huge responsibility that we shoulder before our citizens in the Americas. The OAS Secretary General has noted our inter-American legal instruments, and this is the instance for supporting countries in drafting, implementing, following up on, and disseminating all of this, and you have the commitment of all of us from the OAS. This is a very difficult time, and it has put to the test our ability to show solidarity and cooperation in the face of so many challenges. And the issue of sovereignty has also come up time and again. That is why today is so important. This is also a period that has shown the importance of ingenuity and technology in providing access to justice, developing new ways to carry out legal procedures, which will, in many cases, continue following the pandemic and become part of our shared regulatory systems, both nationally and regionally. And that is why we selected the topic for today's session of REMJA on behalf of the General Secretariat and the Secretary General, who was unable to attend but will be here tomorrow. We wish you most success, and as always, you have all of our support. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Arrighi, for your words and your excellent presentation. The third introductory presentation is on new technologies and strengthening legal systems. And I would like to give the floor to the Executive Director of the Center for Justice Studies in the Americas, Dr. Jaime Arellano. Dr. Arellano, I give you the floor. Good morning, Chair. Thank you so much for your words and for chairing this meeting. Also, welcome to all of the Ministers of Justice, Attorneys General, prosecutors, and other members of delegations present at today's meeting, as well as to our observer states who are participating today. I have been asked to present and discuss with you a conversation with the Ministries of Justice in the region on the role of new technology in strengthening justice systems. And if you will, Attorney General, I would like to share my screen for this presentation. And I will do that right now. Please do. Thank you very much, Chair. So I will go through this very quickly because time is of the essence. And first of all, I'm going to share a lot of things that are already contained in various publications available at our center. And this can accompany today's presentation. They are available as a PDF. And you can see some images of the publications. There are also links to CEJA there. And so in order to ensure effective access to justice, we need to have at least these fundamental elements, and that is we need systems for information and promotion. Then we need to have a way to guide people when they need to determine exactly what they have to do given a situation that's affecting them. And then we need resolution mechanisms for conflicts, or when we need justice, these need to be appropriate. I won't define that right now. They also need to be accessible. Then when it comes to exercising rights or using these mechanisms, we need to have more people who are trained and able to represent them in various legal instances in cases of conflicts. And we also see the importance of mechanisms for conflict resolution. Finally, these systems need to be effective. And one of the problems that we have had in Latin America and in the Caribbean as well, in general throughout the entire hemisphere, is being concerned with the whole part about the debate during the conflict. Particularly, this is the case in the adversary systems, but then we don't have enough resources when it comes to actually ensuring the result materializes. This is an important issue of social peace, and this is, I have no doubt that there are some other elements that did not make it onto this infographic, but these are really what we came up with as being very necessary, and they need to be formalized. This is part of the challenge that we face. And therefore, when it comes to digital justice in Latin America, we have a lot of obstacles and challenges. This is in general, but it also involves the use of technology. One thing that we share with the justice system is that we need to place a priority on, we need to prioritize our needs with a lot of emphasis on this, because we have public policies and justice reforms that are based on the information available and legal statistics. And that means that we have cases today in our legal systems that often are just under the surface. What we are looking at is just the tip of the iceberg. And in fact, we see that justice systems, courts are the focus of our efforts, but then we have so many other conflicts going on among our citizens when it comes to rights. This is a challenge which, very curiously, is something that we need to study, but then we also need to look at how the studies were carried out when we actually develop any reform designs in our justice systems. We need to really incorporate the actual needs of citizens, and we need to work with this with the attorneys in our legal systems.
Digital. Porque cuando las justicias de América Latina y del mundo tuvieron que enfrentar la imposibilidad de...
When we look at the possibility of developing things in person and we go onto the electronic platforms that we have, basically adapted and tweaked to the use of justice systems and legal systems, we come up with a digital divide that exists amongst our population. In other words, the justice system could come up with platforms to deal with this, but then people don't have access to legal assistance systems and a guide for information, and much less, in many cases, can they come forward and report or give a declaration or a deposition in a court. So all of this runs through and through our system, and justice undoubtedly is one of the main topics. And as the technological platforms say, we have to deal with this, and also we have inadequate other systems for the new scenarios. And at the very beginning of the pandemic, as a matter of fact, a very strong reaction of the justice systems to get up and running judicial processes. But generally in our countries, we tended to exclude all legal assistance and the mechanisms for cooperation and solution of conflicts, except for the very first months of the first quarter of the pandemic. This is what we've seen, but we always have to look at this on a second level. So we're not going to be able to go into everything today, but I just wanted to offer you something when we address the idea of real access to justice, particularly in the light of new technologies. And in addition to designing properly from the standpoint of the needs for justice, there are other areas. As I mentioned, we have to take into account legal assistance on the one hand. We have to fight and come up with efficient and effective systems, and then in terms of adequate solutions, the type of conflict, the type of individuals involved, and also some of the barriers that exist, and then finally a quest for effective solutions, which once again, this is to iron out problems such as inefficiencies in areas that are ineffective. And so in this map, just to give you an idea, we have to look at where technology begins to crop up, or it's been around for quite some time now, but with different levels of development. And I'm going to go back over that. All encompassing digital justice. We have electronic negotiations and hybrid virtual justice systems. Let's quickly go over this. Let me just say to you that, as I was saying, we are dealing with the digital divide. And it not only has to do with material access to the internet, of course, this is a big challenge, but also it has to do with the need to have digital literacy. And this is particularly poignant when we pull in generations that we don't do when it comes to the use of technology, and when, of course, we have to look at capacity building in the use of this technology today, frankly, to develop and flesh out our lives, and particularly when we're talking about access to services in legal systems for many. There are other challenges that I'm not going to speak to, but it has to do with something which, of course, has to do with the area of legal systems, but it has to do with accessibility. And this is the fact that to regulate the mobile bandwidth and the possibility that you have got flat fee. In other words, you have the inability to use mobile systems and other restrictions that affect use. Now, all of these things that have to do with 5G and how states can regulate the public use of 5G or a reserve of part of this bandwidth, which is a bandwidth that is run by the state and that needs private parties to provide services. But also, we have to take into account the reserve of a part of this capacity for public use. That doesn't increase state costs, but rather can be tweaked to proper use of 5G. Here we're looking at Wi-Fi that has to be accessible in public areas for people who cannot pay for it, and also the development of portals. This is also the same in overcoming geographic barriers. In our tribunals, we have to have community centers that precisely with service providers, physical service providers, there is access, virtual or digital access to legal assistance, to also the courts themselves. And in other words, they become areas where people can leave their neighborhoods and they can have access to guidelines, orientation, and information so that they can participate in solving conflicts, and they can get presentations, distance presentations, and a place where they can participate in some of the cooperative mechanisms, or where they can be part of the connection and can go to the courts and testify. And then finally, technological solutions mean that applications, for example, of legal information, mobile legal information, or the internet can provide a lot of the information which was reserved for attorneys and which today is out there. And therefore it's logical to put this information in an organized way so that all citizens can identify what the kind of problem is that they have, what kind of justice it refers to, what services can be provided. And of course, this is being done today. We've got this in the attorneys' offices, and obviously in public sectors. We've got justice systems that use the technology and that provide information and facilitate things. Same has to do with getting access to justice through tablets in those communities where there is no access to the internet or mobile bandwidths. We here can ensure access to systems of justice with other portals and the apps that we have. Now, with regards to this topic, then, I'm going to leave you with two takeaways. There are challenges in terms of the digital divide being filled, and with regards to the state, of course, in the area of justice, this is on the shoulders of the state, but also we can develop from the standpoint of justice and from public ministries and prosecutors' offices other points of access to digital information, which will generate mobile justice systems that will seed access to information through tablets and so on. We have to understand that these are things in the service of justice, not the opposite. So technology should be tweaked and used so that it can comply with the principles of justice. And then second point is electronic negotiations or proceedings, and this breaks the digitized experience. We're not talking about PDFing papers, we're talking about moving through processes, and these procedures are going to be digital. And I'm not going to talk about in terms of the criminal aspects or anything else like that, but I'm talking about beginning the procedures, the electronic procedures, and so that things can be accompanied digitally, and the use of technology when this is advisable, and so on, to continue, that is to say, with all of the procedures via the digital world. And this means that in criminal matters, this also gives us a chance to use legacy instruments and, of course, open this up, and this means interdependence or coordination amongst the different players in the system and access to judicial or legacies without any need to copy or be under pressure to use paper, but rather have free access to this legacy technology, or look at some of the areas with our reserves for Attorney General's offices. And this means that we have a digital portfolio as well. And so all of the advantages that we can have and access to these kinds of portfolios and the presentation of electronic briefs and digital hearings are available. The same thing with other prosecutors' offices, Attorney General's offices proceedings in terms of videos. And this means that there's an integrity of what has been declared, and a person can thereafter use all of these things in actual trials. I'm not going to dwell on this, but also electronic proceedings, which is open as a space for higher courts. And this has to do with everything that has to do with allegations in higher courts, which today are off the mark. They are off track. And of course, I'm talking about Supreme Courts or other higher courts when there is procedures in countries. We've got to have access for all colleagues to the litigation in the higher courts, which are used usually in our capitals. Now here I'm going to leave you with some other ideas of strategic digital investment to access to justice. It's called Idea J, strategic digital investment. And this means that there's a need in all of these proceedings or procedures to have the obligation of integrating the platforms in the information systems. Here, very often we come up against system operators that develop platforms separately, and public ministries, the prosecutor's offices, or legal assistance offices, and there's a lack of interoperability which generates or hamstrings the system. There's a loss of time and resources which are unnecessary, and even makes things difficult to design public policies through surveys of information that are top quality as to management statistics and so on and so forth. So the integration of these institutional platforms and information is an opportunity, but it's also a very important need to have right now. And this, of course, allows us to have greater transparency in our information and in accountability by all of the justice system stakeholders. And of course, we can thus make more progress in the public ministries and prosecutors' offices, in the web pages, when it comes to the use of budgets, and when it comes to the declarations, or I should say the sentencing that comes out. Now, digital justice, of course, is there when it comes to the pandemic. And we have mechanisms for conflict settlements, face-to-face as well as virtual. But hybrid systems or virtual systems is what we have. And in terms of what Jean-Michel Herregui was saying a few minutes ago, we are going to come up against a permanence of these situations. They seem transitional, but they're going to be in our justice systems, and this is going to happen in a hybrid way. In other words, the use of one thing in one case. It's probable that some of the present meetings are going to be virtual, some of the others are going to be virtual, but we're going to be using things in a different way. That's why I'm talking about hybrid modalities or face-to-face. And here, we know about this, and we dealt with this in one of our publications. There is the need to be present, given some of the techniques of how things are done for cases, and it's a question of often guarantees or procedural values. Basically, what we've said is that where there is no probatory information, where there is no risk of breaching procedural meetings, we have these hearings virtually, but this becomes complicated when there is probatory need. We come up with the need to know the resolution better and the capacity for contradictory of the probatory information, and particularly in adversarial or litigious cases or criminal cases. There's a debate, and we have to take that into consideration. So once again, in terms of some of the preliminary hearings, and I'm not going to dwell on that, but such as in some of the rural cases or rural courses or criminal cases, there is the opportunity that we can use some of the digital modalities, and this would record the hearings digitally and preserve all of that for use down the line. But there are other issues that have to do with publicity that we have to manage. We have to deal with this and the use of objections, the use of visual means, and so on and so forth. These are all opportunities that we have to look at. So here, what I'm going to leave with you are just some ideas for strategic digital investment, and these procedural modalities that we're using in terms of cases should be the adequate ones. And this means that the platforms and the mobile apps have to be designed based on legal proceedings. And thus far, we have been using, as we were saying at the very beginning, conference platforms, video conference platforms based on the internet, designed for commercial use. And that's fine. We've adapted these uses to the justice proceedings, but we need to develop mobile apps that are going to guarantee our own justice procedures so that there are no objections in terms of the use at different stages. Ideally, also, and here we have to think out of the box, but we have to look for modalities for solving conflicts that are designed for technological and digital justice systems. Think of technology as a support for our debates and discussions, and design processes to guarantee and be used in this way. That is to say, we have to use this technology in the area of the ROC, as it's called. We have online resolution. But here, once again, this is a very important opportunity, once again, that I underscore, to complement legal assistance with a solution for the conflict. And here, basically, we're talking about processes that work hand in hand with what has been happening in Latin America, that is to say asynchronous systems, adversarial or oral systems. Some are synchronous, where parties agree and they have their proof and debate at the same time in the face of all the stakeholders in terms of the system based on experiences. But here, the ROC use the asynchronous modalities as well. And this, of course, obviously allows us to use these platforms for other kinds of solutions that I'm going to speak to now. Here we have the debate of the case of the ROC. We're talking about privatization of justice, or many of these services, I should say, are provided by one of the parties involved in the conflict, such as Amazon and eBay and so on and so forth. As part of the contract in providing their services, they have established and use ODR services that they provide. And here there's a debate in terms of the system where things have to be ironed out, and all those are the debate as to solving the conflict and solutions, which is what happens in arbitration, where you can come up with dissimulated crimes and money laundering, for example, which gives rise to conflicts in a criminal organization in terms of hiding a solution and the conflict when it comes to the state. So what can I leave you with here? Well, to regulate conflict resolution so that we can have procedural guarantees that we referred to a few minutes ago, but on the other hand, also use the ROC for less complex cases, for repetitive, huge cases, and for moving justice away from its hub, for example, and provide services to people who have to go from one country or one jurisdiction. This is the case of tourists, for example, and where nonetheless they can make their claims and use their rights in the justice system of the country in which they find themselves. And then also, this has given rise to a lot of debate as well, particularly in 2016 when we began to roll out and have this debate around justice as to artificial intelligence. Here, I just want to point out that AI undoubtedly can support the design and learning and can improve things because it does allow us to analyze conflict resolution systems and also looks at some of the sentencing declarations. This helps us to improve capacity for the judicial systems, and also it helps us in public policies when it comes to designing public policies and justice, and when it comes to lawmaking to iron out some other problems. But it also allows us to analyze legal decision-making processes, questions that we have to resolve. So it allows support to operations, and we've seen a lot of this when it comes to judicial portfolios and other cases. The use of AI when it comes to repetitive cases that crop up from time to time, and also other things that give rise to more debate, because it allows us to use strategies, negotiation strategies, when we have litigious cases. That helps us to prepare sentences and the use of resources. So what are the debates when it comes to using digital justice? Well, here it has to do with partiality, and debates that have to do with partiality, partial design, or with regards to some of the lack of hearings, but partial designs of logarithms in AI or machine learning, which is underlying machine learning, and this presupposes the use oftentimes of AI to have bail or grant bail, such as in the North American system, which doesn't tally with the system in Latin America when it comes to the debate on the legality of the issue, both in terms of the auditing and the logarithms that are involved. This is something else that we have to take in mind, and of course there is the trend to having a very conservative interpretation and a logarithm that tallies with something from before as opposed to something now. This is something that has to be corrected, but here I'm going to leave you, and I'm going to conclude with some ideas that I'm going to sum up all together for you when it comes to strategic digital investments. We have to slash the digital divide. We have to put technology at the use of justice. This presupposes the integration of platforms, institutions, and information, transparency of information and accountability, technological designs and proper procedures that presuppose platforms and apps that are designed based on procedural guarantees, models for solution of conflicts for digital justice, and regulate the ROC to ensure compliance with procedural guarantees, and use the ROC for causes that are less complex, that are repetitive, and so on, and identify and register the use of AI in justice, because right now people are using AI in many cases, and in many cases there's no awareness nor any registry of what is being done. There's no record. We have to establish rules and standards for the use of AI in justice issues, and to use the multifarious uses of AI in justice. I'm in favor of using technology. I'm the first enthusiast, but I also think that we have to have control, regulations, and standards for its use so that we can ensure that we don't breach fundamental guarantees. I truly appreciate your indulgence, and given that, I shall now hand over the floor. Thank you very much, Dr. Arellano. We really do have a lot of challenges in the region. This has to do with the new technologies and the strengthening of legal cooperation throughout the hemisphere in criminal issues. For this presentation, which is under the chair of the working group of REMJA in legal cooperation and criminal issues, I should now like to give the floor to the Director of International Cooperation of the National Attorney's Office, Dr. Antonio Colo Segovia. You have the floor from Chile. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the Organization of American States, and on behalf of the Attorney General's Office and Public Ministry, I'm going to speak to our work on behalf of the working group, and I'm going to offer some thoughts and some ideas as to the use of new technologies to strengthen and promote international cooperation when it comes to criminal issues. So, Madam Chairman, I'm going to share the screen now, with your permission. Please go ahead. Thank you very much. Very well. First, a couple of words about the context here. We have been discussing for quite a few years now the need to promote the use of new technologies in the various cooperation international criminal issues. And of course, this is particularly true when it comes to COVID-19 and that context, and that is the idea of using new technologies to transform things. And in point of fact, the restrictions because of health authorities in various countries, restrictions on movement in countries and closing down of borders and so on and so forth, including sheltering in place of the population and a lockdown where central authorities and law enforcement work, all of the operators in the justice system are more or less obliged to work from home and to begin to use new technologies with a view to cooperation among states within the framework of criminal proceedings and to make things as normal as possible given the circumstances. So in this regard, then, the use of technology, and of course, everything in keeping with the different contexts in each and every one of our countries, and given the different possibilities of digitizing things and having access to the different platforms and mechanisms to make these new technologies operative, have to be borne in mind. But there are two main international cooperation tools. First, electronic transmission of international cooperation and the formal requests for assistance, in addition to other things, and the use of video conferences. Now, with regards to the electronic transmission of requirements, this has been used in an emergency way given the pandemic, and I would say here there are three main ideas, three major premises. And the first, that obviously it's much quicker to transmit electronically requirements or information from Chile to Ecuador within the framework of a criminal proceeding. This transmission takes seconds, and it's quicker than going by land or air. It's so much faster, and therefore it's much more propitious. It gives us the possibility of having things arrive on time. And before, you close off the investigation in the applicant state, and they could use the information in a criminal case, but now we have something different. But in my opinion, we have seen that this electronic transmission of requirements is not less sure than going over land, and nor is it less valid than anything else. During the experience of the pandemic, we've seen that the use, for example, of institutional electronic transfers and not personal inboxes information where you have access to advanced electronic transmission offers greater certification as to the origin of the procedure. And even in some cases, the use of secure platforms such as certain networks allow us to have a sure virtual space to transmit electronic requirements. And this proved to be mechanism enough to provide guarantees both for the applicant state as well as for the origin, as well as the integrity of the information. So in this regard, then, the basic point here is that for the state, the applicant state, the reply that you get from the other state, first, it guarantees that you're getting the information from a central authority, from a competent authority that has the official remit of the state to be able to send the information, so that there's a certain guarantee of the origin of the information. But on the other hand, there is a guarantee of the integrity of the information that is sent from one state to another, and this is what could be compiled, everything that could be compiled in the state, and is now information that was dealt with as a result of the professional reviews, so that the integrity of the information showed that the electronic transmission did not alter the information. It could even be more sure than paper transmission. But in addition to being valid, it's not less trustworthy or valid when it's sent like this. International conventions, by and large, stipulate that international requirements should be from central authorities. This is in the formal cooperation mode, but none of them stipulate that this was going to be transmitted by paper. It left open the possibility that there are even some conventions that promote the use of electronic means to transmit this information electronically. For example, in Europe, when there are emergencies, it allows for the central authorities to electronically transmit things for mutual assistance. And in addition to this, let me just point out that we've got electronic transmission, which has tended to be used in the region for quite a few years now. The central authority in Chile, the public ministry, through extraditions, has stepped up agreements or bilateral accords with other countries to get through the international requirements for assistance. This has been up and running for quite a few years now with Peru, Argentina, Brazil, Ecuador, with the United States, Australia, Holland, Portugal, with the Czech Republic and other countries with which we have signed some bilateral agreements. Now, with regards to video conferencing, we have seen their use, and they continue to be timely, and once again, it's become a necessity. And it has shown us that it's a very useful tool. It's very helpful, particularly in terms of coordination in real time among competent authorities, the law enforcement and central authorities as well, in terms of legal assistance. So this is the same requirement. Chile asked Ecuador, for example, for video conference that allowed people to prepare for something, have communication between the public authorities and the state that made the request for the other state, and so on and so forth. So this is a way to be able to talk in real time on some of the problems that implementation of a requirement was seen. And also in terms of declarations and making declarations, it can be done directly from the applicant states in terms of victims, witnesses, and even those who are convicted, and in terms of looking at some of the legislation. So this has allowed us and has allowed the competent authorities of the applicant states, the justice tribunals, to now take declarations directly through video conferences and looking at some of the victim statements and others, the witnesses. It is also good in terms of court cases. And then finally, and here I'm talking about international cooperation, but this is the trend for all kinds of hearings, and this is to have video conferencing hearings. In the case of Chile, for example, all of the extradition processes, the passive ones, began to take place, and they're still done through video conferencing. And this linked up all of the parties involved, and this is how the respective hearing took place. And also, of course, we have other uses of technology for international cooperation. We believe that this will continue to be developed. For example, we've seen the use and the creation of clouds, the clouds, institutional clouds, in other words, these virtual spaces that have certain security modalities that allow you to upload photos or other information that had been sent to other states within the framework of international cooperation allows the other state with links to download the information in a safe and secure way. So once again, with sufficient guarantees as to the origin and the integrity of information.
Grupo de Trabajo de Cooperación Jurídica Internacional de la REM.
REMJA has been working on this as well and has proposed an additional protocol to the Inter-American Convention. And that protocol addresses the electronic transmission of assistance requests and video conferencing. We believe that this is a very relevant instrument, and it will allow us to have a regulatory basis. We understand that we need to have this additional foundation in order to send requests for international assistance, as well as hold video conferencing. And the draft protocol would allow states to use electronic means such as email for documents that are later ratified on paper in hard copies, or to indicate that they will be sending documents electronically without having to later provide hard copies. And this would make international cooperation in criminal matters much easier. And then we also need a standard for using this tool for international cooperation, what processes to follow for video conferencing, how to hold a hearing, for example, standards for the video hearing, and a whole set of regulations that can be used by member states in using this fundamental tool. And now I will stop sharing my screen. And so with that, I would like to insist once again that using these new technologies is fundamental, and this is the new standard for submitting documents for international cooperation. And this is really helping in closing a huge digital gap, a huge gap internationally. And it allows us to, in a timely fashion, address cases and get information to prosecutors as well in order to provide this evidence to courts. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Segovia, for your excellent and very clear presentation. Our final introductory presentation is with regard to the importance of legal cooperation at the hemispheric level in working against cybercrime. For this presentation, which will be given by the chair of the REMHA Working Group on Legal Cooperation Against Cybercrime, I am delighted to give the floor to the main legal advisor for the section on cybercrime and intellectual property from the U.S. DOJ, Dr. Anthony Tiluksing. Dr. Tiluksing, I give you the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may share my screen. Dear Excellencies, greetings from Baltimore, Maryland. The pandemic has left many of us at home to continue our work, and we're doing so. I am pleased today to provide an update on the activities of the REMHA Working Group on Cybercrime, which is intended to strengthen hemispheric law enforcement cooperation on cybercrime. As background, the Working Group on Cybercrime has three principal objectives. The first is to strengthen cooperation in the hemisphere on cybercrime. The second is to facilitate an exchange of information and operational experience. And third, of course, is to provide recommendations to the REMHA to meet these objectives. Unique among working groups in which I participate, the REMHA Working Group on Cybercrime brings together government experts such as police, prosecutors, and even judges at times, which helps us keep the focus on practical operational matters. And the working group uses, the way we work is to use case examples to illustrate both problems and potential solutions. We have also brought service providers, financial companies, telecom companies from the region to attend the working group and present on their policies, which helps to develop and support cooperation between these companies and regional police forces. Since 2016, the working group has sponsored, with the U.S. State Department funding, about 20 training workshops, 9 for judges and 11 for prosecutors. This supplements investigator training provided by U.S. investigative agencies and the Department of Justice. This is a list of the workshops by year and the countries which generously offered to host these workshops. As you can see, we look for regional balance to assure the opportunity to attend. It is usually not practical to have all of the member states attend in one workshop, so we try to break it down among interested member states, and sometimes by language, which reduces the costs. Last year and this year, 2 of these programs were virtual conferences, which included coverage of specific COVID frauds that appeared as a result of the novel coronavirus pandemic. Looking more closely at the virtual workshops, the topics included common cybercrime attacks, virtual currency, cryptocurrency, how to obtain evidence held by service providers, how to use open source tools to locate evidence on social media, as well as international cooperation. In December 2020, a pilot program on advanced topics addressed the dark web and virtual currency for prosecutors. Another virtual workshop is planned for this summer. As the chair of the working group, I also participated and collaborated with the Council of Europe in a series of virtual bilateral workshops with CARICOM member states. These workshops focused on current legislation that may be in place or pending in these countries and examined this legislation with a view of aligning them with the provisions of the Budapest Convention. These programs also help to identify specific law enforcement needs for future bilateral work in the region. As part of its service to member states, the chair of the working group also participated in a review of pending legislation, a desk review largely, again, to compare the provisions of legislation with prevailing international standards. This desk review is available on a request for any member state that would send its request to the Department of Legal Cooperation or even SICTE, another OAS entity with which the REMHA working group works closely. In addition, speaking of REMHA, the working group also continued its collaboration. Speaking of SICTE, also continued its collaboration with SICTE to address electronic evidence issues and other law enforcement matters in the context of cybersecurity training. Of course, SICTE addresses cybersecurity, but many member states do not draw as clear a line between cybersecurity matters and cybercrime matters, which underlines the importance of cooperation and collaboration between SICTE and REMHA. The working group also works with U.S. prosecutors as part of the ICHIP program. The ICHIP program is a U.S. program which places experienced federal prosecutors in key locations to exchange best practices and also to mentor regional countries in cybercrime investigation. We're fortunate in the hemisphere to have two ICHIP prosecutors, one located in Panama City and the other in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Both of these positions are intended not only to provide U.S. training, but also to work with the working group where possible on joint programs. For example, the ICHIP in Panama presented the first ever program on investigating cryptocurrency kiosks, including how to trace cryptocurrency addresses on the blockchain. The chair of the working group also participated in a 5-session program for Panamanian judges, which was presented by the ICHIP in Panama City. There was keen interest on the part of Panama's judiciary in these issues, and these programs can be repeated for other member states upon request. In addition, and this to my mind is significant, the last 5 years have seen 6 additional member states accede to the Budapest Convention. Chile in 2017, Costa Rica in 2017, Argentina in 2018, Paraguay in 2018, Peru in 2019, and Colombia in 2020. Accession to the Budapest Convention strengthens both hemispheric and global cooperation in the fight against cybercrime. In addition, other member states have expressed an interest in accession and are now working with the Council of Europe to facilitate that accession and make any changes to domestic legislation that may be necessary. The working group is prepared to continue to cooperate with the Council of Europe to facilitate the accession of OAS member states. Finally, the working group has submitted its recommendations to the REMHA for approval, which can be summarized in 3 key points. Continue the work to build law enforcement capacity to strengthen international cooperation on cybercrime, promote accession to the Budapest Convention, and continue collaboration with OAS offices and regional and international organizations. Before I conclude, I'd like to take a moment to express my gratitude as well as the gratitude of the members of the working group, to the staff of the REMHA Department of Legal Cooperation. The mission of the working group could not be achieved without their considerable support. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tirlok-Singh, for your presentation. As I anticipated a few moments ago, I am delighted to inform you that the regional group on Central American cooperation is suggesting Mr. Edgar Munoz Martinez, the Secretary General, Interim Secretary General of Legal Cooperations in Guatemala and representative of his country, as second vice chair. If there are no objections, I would like to declare Interim Secretary General of the Public Ministry, Edgar Munoz Martinez, as the second vice chair of this meeting. Therefore, the first vice chair will be from the Bahamas, and the second will be from the Interim Secretary General of the Public Ministry of Guatemala. Pursuant to the Washington document, we are able to move forward with this meeting. Having concluded the introductory presentations, we will now move on to the heads of delegation dialogue on the presentations as distributed previously. And the topic, once again, is new technologies in service of justice and international legal cooperation in the Americas. policies and experiences in modernizing justice beyond the pandemic to promote justice for all in the hemisphere. I'd like to remind the delegations that based on this guide, the head of delegations will have the floor in alphabetical order in Spanish. And we ask you to keep your presentation to less than 7 minutes. Therefore, I'd like to give the floor to the head of delegation from Antigua and Barbuda.
Antigua and Barbuda, could you please request the floor?
El fiscal general, ministro de Asuntos Jurídicos,
Attorney General, Ministry of Justice from the country of Antigua and Barbuda has the floor.
No veo.
I don't see Antigua and Barbuda requesting the floor, Chair. I see Sarah Chief Phillips, who is at the meeting, but she has not requested the floor. Can we please have technical assistance help her? And so we will continue. I will give the floor to the head of delegation from Argentina, Dr. Martinez Soria, Minister of Justice and Human Rights in Argentina. I give you the floor. I am delighted to salute each and every prosecutor general, attorney general, minister of justice, and other authorities who are taking part in this 11th meeting of high-level authorities and ministers of justice in the Americas. At the outset, I would like to congratulate Ecuador for hosting this event and also for all of the work carried out for the participating delegations in this technical and political forum. 6 years have passed since the last meeting of REMJA, and we have gone through a pandemic. In that time, we have been able to recover this forum, which allows us to generate greater technical cooperation, coordination in various areas at the highest level in each of our countries throughout the continent. In the next 2 days, we are going to be focusing on an issue that I believe is more than ever today extremely fundamental and pertinent, and that is access to justice for everyone, obviously beyond the COVID-19 pandemic. As we know all too well, the pandemic was a surprise and a shock to our legal systems as well as the entire world. However, it has been a year since that began, and this has left us with a very valuable argument for expanding access to justice, which has been something that many of our citizens suffer from. And I would also like to highlight the importance of this REMJA, including experiences and specific policies that have been applied by countries in the region in order to address the various challenges in our justice systems in the face of the pandemic. As we all know, technology is key to particularly during the current health crisis. We need to work to guarantee access to justice for all citizens. The best way to We need to look at improving through online platforms, skills training, how we can hold various types of virtual hearings and other procedures. And this is a very clear example, without a doubt, of all of that. And at the same time, I think that we should not limit ourselves to only trying to recover in the face of the pandemic, as it has already been more than a year since that has passed. We, in fact, need to take advantage of the situation and leverage it in order to continue moving forward toward the very necessary modernization of all of our justice systems and the justice services that they provide. For that reason, there is no doubt that incorporating new technologies, particularly ICT, is a tool that is extremely valuable in modernizing our systems. It is sine qua non in order to ensure justice, transparency, and provide services to all citizens. Transparency of legal information, such as publishing information and citizens' access, legal explanations, are all tasks in which we can and should work in our legal systems in all of our countries. And these powers allow us to be effective and provide more real-time connections and bring more legal system employees together to carry out their duties more effectively. And in the middle of the crisis that our structures are facing today when it comes to administrating justice, it is more necessary than ever that we move forward with modernizing reforms. And against that backdrop, new technologies, without a doubt, are a concrete tool to re-legitimize justice and reestablish the ties of confidence that we need to weave with all of our citizens. And certainly we cannot forget considering the reality in which we find ourselves today. This is a reality in which time has been reduced, distances are smaller, and we are seeing more development take place virtually. That is our reality, and we cannot let the use of all this new technology fall by the wayside. When it comes to situations of isolation, restrictions, limits on movement, which we have been facing throughout the pandemic, it is obvious that ICTs have served as a way to be an intermediary and a real vehicle and adept tool for cybercrime. And in that sense, in the year 2020, we approved, for example, in Argentina, law 27590. And this is a law that created a national program for preventing crime and awareness raising on grooming or cyberbullying against children and teens. And the goal of this law, which was adopted last year in 2020, was to prevent grooming and cyberbullying through responsible use of ICTs, as well as training our educational staff in order to provide countries with effective tools that are efficient, effective, and can actually provide a response to the various scourges we face in our era. We need to promote international legal cooperation. I also think that technology has a central role in strengthening this type of international cooperation in which we are all working. This RAMJA, without a doubt, is a very clear demonstration of the opportunities that ICTs provide us to tackle various types of obstacles, challenges, and aggressions on the horizon. I would like to express our support for the initiatives in our draft recommendations and conclusions in order to strengthen this REMJA. Consolidating this space will allow us to hold periodic meetings at the highest levels of authority in justice throughout the entire hemisphere, and it will also allow us to make significant strides and provide input linked to justice and international legal cooperation. What's more, these are topics that from a technical standpoint need to be addressed by the various instances in which the OAS has been working. I'd like to conclude by highlighting the importance of continuing to strengthen the Center for Justice Studies of the Americas in order to continue providing contributions to improve our justice systems through its comparative studies, reports, and all of its activities that it carries out on a regular basis. That said, I would like to thank you very sincerely to the chair of this new REMJA, Diana Salazar. Thank you so much for being here. Also, I'd like to thank all of the member states and their respective authorities who are with us today. I wish everyone most successful meeting, and this will be a benefit to all of our countries and our citizens. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the head of delegation from Argentina. And now we will hear from the head of delegation of the Bahamas.
Tiene la palabra.
Bahamas has the floor.
Okay. Yeah, I'm right here. Hi, good morning, Madam Chair, and all distinguished delegates attending this conference. The Bahamas shares the sentiments expressed by Argentina of the importance of the use of information and communication technologies in the fight against all forms of crime, most particularly those crimes that we now find today in the world that are, because of the pandemic, a lot of matters have moved into the digital sphere, and we ourselves are seeing that here in the Bahamas. We would wish to commend the Organization of American States for its diligence, proactiveness, and its commitment to excellence. The government of the Bahamas also congratulates the Secretariat for this most timely conference, as we are all severally grappling with the novel legal, economic, social, and health challenges posed by the continuing pandemic. And while our efforts are undoubtedly broadly similar, there is still much we can all learn from this communal sharing of experiences. In 2020, we embarked on a new decade with new hopes, new dreams. However, that decade did not continue the way we anticipated. And as I have always had reason to say, 2020 really was marked as a lost year. In the Bahamas, we have been, like every other country, struggling with this pandemic. And so we ourselves have reached a point where we have a total of roughly 11,225 confirmed cases. Of course, this is over the whole year and quarter, and so we are struggling ourselves. But, we did what we had to do, and so one of the reasons I was late is, of course, we were continuing our emergency proclamations to maintain the ability to intervene proactively in terms of individual and social contact. Because, of course, we're now at the stage of pandemic fatigue. So, having taken our very strict measures, we have, by and large, been able to weather this storm thus far. Of course, we are all dealing with the issue of the how shall I put it, these new variants that are popping up. In the Bahamas around the world, as elsewhere around the world, our court system has also radically adapted to the new realities and has gone extensively and almost totally digital, except in our magistrates' courts, which are at a lower level of the system of justice. But the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal, are all entirely digital and conduct hearings, receive all submissions virtually, and conduct all of their hearings by remote means. The judiciary has been especially proactive and quick to react to these changing realities. We have already have a legislative framework in place to accommodate these sorts of hearings. And so we see that we are at least adapting as much as we could to preserve the system of justice and its accessibility to those persons who may need to have recourse to courts in order to uphold their rights and or to take action for civil matters. This year, we in the Bahamas will implement an integrated case management system that will be the backbone of the new information and communication platform for the judiciary and will allow the courts to deliver a wide range, an even wider range of e-services, so that we will have throughout the legal system e-filing, e-scheduling, e-payments, e-notices, e-probate for applications, and other customized subject matters applications. Through our integrated case management system, which is being really spearheaded by the learned Chief Justice, with our full support at the technical and, of course, policy level, we will implement a total and effective digital system and platform, inclusive then of the magistrates' courts. So in order to deal with the COVID pandemic, of course, we've had to seek to ameliorate the rigors of the law. So we've moved away from criminalizing breaches, except the worst breaches, and into a ticketing system for that. We've installed plexiglass in all of our criminal courts and have resumed jury trials. In the Bahamas, when we come now to the issue of healthcare, healthcare is free for all children, the elderly, the indigent, and all public servants, as well as for the uniformed branches. We have a very well-established system of community clinics throughout the islands. As some would know, most would know, the Bahamas is an archipelago. We say of 700 islands, but really they're islands, rocks, and keys, as we call them. There are only about 38 or so islands with inhabitants on them. But yet, in most of the larger of these, we have to have community clinics, and these are well dispersed throughout the country and accessible to all Bahamians. So once again, I would like to thank the Secretariat for its diligence and its proactiveness, and certainly in the area of mutual legal assistance and international cooperation, the Bahamas has all the tools in place, whether virtually or in direct contact, to cooperate fully with all of our regional and international partners. Madam Chair, I thank you for your kind consideration and for the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bahamas. Now, we should like to give the floor to the head of the delegation of Barbados.
Barbados, could you please request the floor?
Quizá tiene.
Perhaps there's a technical glitch, so we can move on, giving the floor to the head of the delegation of Belize.
¿Podemos confirmar, por favor?
Sí, está diciendo que
Belize, could you please request the floor? No, you have to activate your camera and your microphone. And the button. I will try to activate it from my side.
I hear you clearly.
Elise, do
Are
you
you
hear
hearing
us?
me?
Now, yes, we can hear you, but we cannot see you. If you want to start.
Okay, so I want to echo the exact sentiments of the Bahamas. Say that in the situation of Belize, we were not fully digital to be able to start up our court system. We have restarted the court system with some limitations because of the COVID regulations. We had a virtual hearing for the Court of Appeal for the first time in October of last year. And the remainder of this year, those hearings will be virtual. For the Supreme Court, matters are being heard virtually, save and except criminal matters, which still are being heard in person with limitations as the persons who can be present in the courtroom. Our magistracy has not yet been operating on a virtual platform, but save for those exceptions, we weren't as ready as the Bahamas to be fully virtual in terms of our court proceedings. But what Bahamas has echoed certainly is true. And for not wanting to repeat myself, I wish to echo the same sentiments with the caveats as to the specifics for our court system. Hello? Yes, I'm so sorry. I seem to be having technical difficulties. Were you able to see me because my camera has been on?
No la vemos. No se la ve.
No, we cannot see you,
okay,
but we
my
can
apologies
hear you.
For this glitch this morning. All right. So yes, those would be my comments this morning, and I thank you for the opportunity to share our experience on this subject matter.
Thank you very much, Belize. To continue, let us give the floor to Bolivia. Bolivia has the floor. Hi, good morning. Warm greetings to the chair, Diana Salazar, and to all colleague ministers. This is a very important meeting for my country to be able to participate in this meeting. We recovered our democracy. We did have a coup, and our health crisis with COVID-19 has led us to have a host of different debates and discussions. And we are very hopeful to have the work that we're doing in the framework of cooperation and ties with other states. Our country has one of the largest populations in the region. And beyond our borders, we've got a lot of Bolivians in Argentina, in Spain, and in the United States, and in various countries of the world. We believe that all of the facilities that can be given to these citizens will be welcome as part of President Arce's government to provide all of the facilities, and we are very concerned with trafficking in persons. It's a challenge that we have to combat regionally, and that is why we feel that this arena is a propitious one to coordinate and to move ahead with efforts that will allow us to use information technologies along the lines that have been already put by the various distinguished colleagues in the preparatory work in the Ministry of Justice. The Bolivian government, because of the COVID, has undertaken a host of different activities which seek to modernize our justice system. We are once again working so that interoperability is truly up and running amongst the various institutions here, and this had led us to make great technological strides in the last few years. Perhaps it's very artisanal in terms of the use of Zoom and WhatsApp and other means that we didn't think about when we made these strides, but we are crystallizing progress. Our digital population is very advanced indeed. We have about 25,000 attorneys that have been part and parcel of this process, in which the use of information technologies are more than welcome by them so that they could deal with social distancing and they wouldn't get sick. It's a very sad scenario. It has caused us a lot of deep sentiments and grieving in our country, but it also has given us a lot of opportunities, and maybe the attorneys have been the most to use this technology. So now with these changes and with the crisis, we're going to be able to stabilize things and move ahead and use intensive communication modalities. We continue to have access for the most vulnerable in our country with these modalities, and that's why we've undertaken very demanding work. It's very tiresome in terms of national and international work. This technology has given us, given most vulnerable people their rights, and that's why we're very happy to work with you, to work in a coordinated way throughout the entire region on cybercrime and everything that we have to fight throughout the region. All of this is part of the work and the efforts that we are doing and that we have to do with all the ministers of justice so that people can have access to justice. All Bolivians will have access to justice, and like Argentina, we feel that the role of the JSCA is crucial in this area. And we are deeply grateful to JSCA for the opportunities given to my country the last few years, and we're going to work alongside them in the future. This is a relationship where many Bolivians have been part and parcel of all of the efforts made by JSCA in the criminal area, including myself. We are students of JSCA to have undertaken this process to build new justice in Latin America, more humane, more dignified, that has respect for Inter-American Convention of Human Rights and other conventions. This means that we have to continue to work on things, but we are very hopeful that this event and all the coordinated work amongst the ministers of justice will give us a chance to avail ourselves of this crisis as an opportunity, and that will lead us to deal with all of the efforts made for technology across the board. So in this regard, the Ministry of Justice has promoted in our country the treaty in terms of transmission of information and international information amongst central authorities who have signed in Medellin in 2019 this agreement amongst the ministers of justice, and we are firmly committed to the work of cooperation that all states have. And that's why we want to underscore that there is a crisis in the region. There is a health crisis, but it makes us work hand in hand with our brothers in Venezuela and our other brothers who are in different countries. We truly appreciate all countries that receive our Bolivians over and above our borders. And this mechanism that has reestablished and has a host of different technological recommendations that gives us information will give us a better standard of creating access to justice. We are only going to be able to fight the pandemic and all of the crises that plague us if we are together. And this is the effort that we have to make. And that's going to keep us whole. Once again, on behalf of my country, I would like to thank you to offer these words. And as I began my comments with reference to our country in all of the international fora, particularly in the Organization of American States. At the request of my minister and my government, once again, I would like to say that I won't be able to participate tomorrow in the forum and as we follow up on our deliberations. But our position as a government is that Luis Almagro bears in mind things that are sad for us. We won't be able to participate. This is the official position of the Bolivian government, and I just wanted to express our sadness because of that, but we will follow attentively all of the presentations and all of the information that we are receiving, and we agree to the documents that are being worked on by the Ministers of Justice. Once again, we would like to warmly greet Diana and thank you for sharing this event and also for being very efficient in your work. It's very important for my country. We're going to continue doing our level best, and we will also continue to meet all the requests for joint work throughout the region. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Minister, for your comments. Now, I should like to give the floor to the delegation of Brazil that is made up of Anderson Solis, Minister of Justice, and Mr. Sumares, Attorney General of the Republic of Brazil. Brazil has the floor. Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, Attorney General of Ecuador. The Minister Anderson Gomez was with us at the very beginning of this event, but I regret his absence right now. He's not with us, but he did leave us a message on a video, and our Attorney General the same. So I would like to thank the organizers for this, and I would like to now share the video with you. Your Excellency, Minister of Ecuador, host country of this meeting, we would like to thank you for your kindness and the efficiency in organizing this very relevant meeting. Your Excellency, Madam Salazar, here on behalf of other delegations, we should like to warmly greet you. Your Excellency, Ms. Almagro, Secretary General of the OAS, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors of Brazil, Mr. Magalhães, and Mr. João Amino and Santa Filha. Your Excellency, Attorney General of the Federal Republic of Brazil, my friend, Augusto Soares, who's with me here. Various distinguished delegations at this very special event where we are celebrating the 11th REMJA meeting of Attorney General and other ministers of the Americas, leads us to be very happy to participate in this high-level meeting, and I'd like to commend the government of Ecuador for picking up this initiative. And it's through these discussions and debates that we will be able to successfully improve the justice systems in our region, as well as develop better tools that can work and make us have more modern cooperation and adapt to the new realities throughout our hemisphere. Along this line, then, the transmission of requests for criminal matters is crucial for Brazil. It's a priority, and this is very well reflected in the document of conclusions and recommendations of this ministers' meeting. A good part of the professionals in the criminal justice system in Brazil have electronic systems and judicial procedures when it comes to administrative matters. These things are digitized in Brazil, but when we talk about original documents of any trial in Brazil, we're referring to electronic documents in Brazil of those that were already digitized. In these cases, the digital documents have copies, and obviously it goes along with the normal procedures, but this goes along with what is happening in the country, and this was strongly promoted because of the coronavirus. and it has shown itself or proved to be agile, efficient, and trustworthy. So this is crucial to promote modernization of justice in our countries. And along that line, then, we ask that the various working groups on criminal matters working group looks at inter-American cooperation for mutual legal assistance when it comes to criminal matters, when it comes to the use of new technologies for communication and video conference hearings. And this scenario, I emphasize the importance of this forum in promoting greater instruments that have efficacies amongst all of us, looking at the promotion of new tools such as modern communication tools and the management of legal cooperation, making it possible to have continuous work in justice systems through programs and technical assistance. Every minister and dear delegates and ministers, the ministry in Brazil has worked hard to consolidate a model when it comes to trafficking of drugs and arms and criminal organizations. This has been built on guidelines to disassemble these organizations through investigations. When we look at money laundering, the gang leaders and international cooperation, this is a parameter that has really caused a lot of damage to organized crime, so to speak. And in this regard, I'd like to congratulate the meeting of ministers of justice and other authorities when it comes to promoting synergies between your procedures and those that we have crafted in the ministers and public security. I applaud you for your efforts, and efforts have to be made to combat a common enemy, be it transnational crime in the Americas. Thank you very much. I would like to compliment those comments. President of the First Network, and I should like to warmly greet all of the authorities and who are participating in this meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very happy to participate in this event to share with you, Your Excellencies, if only briefly, the experience of the Republic of Brazil when it comes to using technology to modernize and adapt justice to our current challenges. As we all well know, the context of the pandemic underscored even more for us the need to have technological tools which are secure and advanced with a view to providing access to justice and improvements when it comes to providing services with efficiency and transparency. Only through these advances has the Attorney General's office been able to broach all of this work remotely during the pandemic, as well as uphold our virtual world and deal with our citizens. We have digitized systems that electronically deal with cases and allow for the direct communication with higher legal authorities and all of the entities in the federal systems. These are distributed throughout Brazil. In addition to that, we have other tools with Simba information systems that became internationally known because of its widespread use in the fight against money laundering. I'd like to draw your attention to the video conferencing system used by the justice systems and came up with significant results and a lot of benefits. But that's not why we should overlook the rights of the victims and the accused. And that is why we have to ensure that their use doesn't produce negative effects or any degrading treatment. And as far as concerns hearings, according to Article 7, and those other things implemented in Brazil. Now, as far as concerns international legal cooperation in criminal matters, the experience of the Attorney General's offices It shows that the transmission of requests is not only viable and feasible, but it's effective and efficient. And that's why we defend improving direct communication, simplified communication amongst the authorities. This is in response to transnational crime, transnational conflict organized crimes, which is even more bold, which makes it imperative for us to make headway in using modern tools that will make it possible to have agile cooperation and that ensures at the same time validity of the information transmitted. In this regard, then, I promote joint investigatory teams and agreements for interinstitutional cooperation in the Americas through digital flows between people and an increase in the use of the internet in keeping with the reality. This has become even more clear given all of the efforts made for technical cooperation developed within organizations and organizations of the American states members that also have efficient systems. The Brazilian system moves towards capacity building to deal with crimes that involve the cyber universe. And I would like to underscore the pillars of dialogue that we have: democracy, human rights, multidimensional security, and sustainable development. Environment and socioeconomic goals are ours as well. And thus, I would like to renew the commitment of this Attorney General's Office of Brazil to safeguard our common values to the interest of all peoples of the Americas. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much to the heads of the Brazilian delegation. Now let us continue with Costa Rica. You have the floor.
Muchísimas gracias, honorable señora presidenta.
Thank you very much, Chair. In my presentation on behalf of Costa Rica, at the outset, I would like to salute you and the other delegations to the OAS who are with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, we are living through a period of contrasts. We see technological progress, which has opened up endless opportunities and possibilities. At the same time, however, it has led to challenges that we can only solve at a regional level. The pandemic, which has lasted for more than a year, is a turning point, and we have seen how it has placed people's health at risk, as well as their ability to enjoy other human rights, including access to justice. The consequences of this will continue in time, and we will have to overcome many of its manifestations. And unfortunately, this has affected the most vulnerable sectors of our populations more severely than others. This includes people living in poverty, women, children, young people, and minorities. That is why it is necessary more than ever for us to be vigilant when it comes to overcoming and preventing social conflict, and this includes in violence and social conflict. Today, we are working on behalf of justice and committing our efforts to create more fair economies and more inclusive societies in which no one falls behind. As a prerequisite, we need to focus our attention on violence and find constructive ways to address conflicts at any level. As a Minister of Justice in the Republic of Costa Rica, I have had to work throughout COVID-19, not only in focusing on our efforts to prevent violence, but also from the perspective of the penitentiary system, which is very complex. In Costa Rica, we saw contagion in prisons 4 months after the first contagion in our country, and out of 16,000 people behind bars, we have only 29 active cases of COVID right now. This has been a tireless effort that we put forth day in and day out, and technology has played a key role. When it comes to avoiding the risk of contagion among people who have been placed in jails and penitentiaries, we have held virtual hearings and also worked to use them to allow prisoners to have contact with their family and loved ones. And this has been important use of technology that required the prison's resources. And thanks to this technology, we have also opened up permanent dialogue spaces with associations of family members of people who are deprived of freedom. And this has allowed us to this has allowed us to let them know what we are doing in the context of the pandemic, and it has also allowed us to listen to their suggestions and advice for how to improve things. In our crime prevention system, we began implementing virtual services and platforms. This ensured the participation of children and young people as part of this process. And that means that we were able to hold virtual sessions throughout the country on this topic. With the digitalization, we have the risk of becoming indifferent to people or having too little contact. And we need to, of course, always place people at the very heart of our efforts. So that is what we have done. We have harnessed technology as a tool to ensure their dignity. We are living through unprecedented times, and that has meant that we have been able to use technology to serve people and overcome this challenge and other future crises. That is why I am so full of hope in participating in today's meeting. And this is a space for Americans to come together and reiterate our commitment to strengthening our justice systems, as well as establishing and consolidating our channels for cooperation in combating different types of crime and serving so many people who have become victims of those crimes in all of our countries. If I may, Chair, I would like to give the floor to Emilia Navas. Thank you very much. Thank you. Please turn on your camera and microphone. Good afternoon, Chair Diana Salazar. I am so happy to be here today, and I would like to thank all of the representatives of the various ministries of justice who are here from ministries of justice, attorney general's offices, and public prosecutors and public ministries. The daily use of technology by citizens has become an indispensable need, and therefore we need to provide people with better services. Since 2015 in Costa Rica, we have been implementing our National Telecoms Development 2015-2021 plan, known as Costa Rica, a Connected Society, with the goal of increasing access to technology for social, economic development and equality in our country. This has broken down walls between people around the world and has allowed people to engage in professional development, interactive learning, tools for all types of data processing, channels for communication, storing huge amounts of information, automated work and promoted interactivity. As a conclusion, technology is not a protagonist in our society. It is protagonism in our society, and at every level we need to adapt and provide a response to technology's role in society. And we see that those who work in the justice system need to be the same. They cannot fall behind. They need to be trained and ready for this type of development. And this is basic for information, communication, leisure, as well as legal system processes. And this is something very important when it comes to internet access. This is very necessary, and it has been included in our school system as well as other training for police departments in our country. We have seen that over the last several years grow exponentially. Teachers also have the opportunity to attend online educational programming through these platforms that can be adapted for large or small groups and even individuals. It is important to note also that trainers and participants, when it comes to prosecutors, need to understand not only the technical end of things, but also they need new technological understanding that involves comprehending the web and how to use all of its potential and the benefits of all users. If we have teachers who are trained in everything that ICT gives us, then we will have success, and this will be more dynamic, more attractive. It will involve more people who are interested in training activities and boost everyone's knowledge. We need to create learning communities that are virtual, as well as share information, new communication strategies, and learning. From training schools, we need to focus on implementing ICTs to stimulate creativity and innovation. We need to experiment and be able to use them responsibly in line with people's skills and abilities, as well as to look at how we can improve learning itself. Applied communication technology is a key difference in a developed society from more basic societies or developing societies. And in the pandemic, this has become exacerbated and highlighted even more. There is no longer any doubt about any gaps in our society. And since last year, we have been working to improve access to ICTs and training in the Costa Rican public sector. Today, we are able to conclude that there is interest, motivation, interaction, elaboration, autonomy, and communication. Our training schools as centers for studies are very dynamic structures that need to carry out their work to promote knowledge, and that is why training and preparation of our participants will create a more competitive and developed society, and that is a target that we cannot forget at any institution. Teaching processes need to be more adapted to ICTs so that staff and faculty are able to be trained in ICTs themselves. And this is how our training schools and police academies will be able to overcome economic, cultural, technological, and other gaps in order to ensure that they are integrated with new technologies. And this not only increases the thirst to learn, but also can be incorporated in the society in which we live, which we have seen more in some countries than in others over the last several years. In addition to training at the Public Prosecutor's Office, we have been harnessing ICTs in carrying out our work, holding trials and hearings on virtual platforms, ensuring access to information. And in the case of the image of the public prosecutor's office, which today has been a real exercise in transparency and accountability in the use and potential of our public prosecutor ministry's website. We have been working to ensure that telework continues to provide society with all of its basic needs. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the Costa Rican delegation. And to close this first section, we will give the floor to the delegation of Chile. I did note that Canada asked to speak tomorrow, and so we will hear from them later on. For now, we will give the floor to Chile. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to the chair of this meeting, the Attorney General of Ecuador, Diana Salazar. I would also like to greet all of the attendees at this 11th meeting of REMJA. That includes attorneys general, ministers of justice, prosecutors, and other delegations to the OAS. We believe that this is a very important meeting to have, particularly online. The internet is very relevant today, and that is why I would like to thank the OAS and we note the importance of exchanging experience with ICT, which should be incorporated in all of our justice systems. And I would also like to thank our permanent representative of Chile who is with us today. Particularly, thank you to our Attorney General for providing us with a report. And we note the importance of work in criminal matters. Interpreter notes the extremely poor sound quality and is unable to understand all of the original. We need to adopt a protocol on mutual assistance, and we hope that we will be able to make strides in this area in order to very soon approve that protocol and begin implementing it at the OAS as a real inter-American legal instrument. That said, we would like to share the importance at our Ministry of Justice in Chile of the main value that guides our interaction, which is access to justice, and underscore all of the work that we have been carrying out in order to modernize our legislative regulation and our entire legal system as a whole. This has been vital, and we have learned a lot and considered the challenges that we face, which have been caused by the pandemic, and no one has been spared these challenges, but it has made us study the use of technology in various types of legal proceedings. And in Chile, we have seen the very important effect and the swift reaction of our citizens after we published a law last year that adapted our legal system in order to be able to adapt appropriately and changed the ways that we were able to access justice remotely. This allowed us to create an exceptional legal system, and that was adopted by our Supreme Court with the use of video conferencing platforms, remote hearings, and any other instruments that allowed us to continue providing legal system services in a very complex context. And this crisis, which has caused so much pain and suffering throughout the world, has also forced us to rethink our short and long-term responses when it comes to providing services in real time, and to continue moving forward, we need to look at how we're going to incorporate these methods in the future. In addition to this special law that we adopted, we have redefined a new draft law that was written last year, aimed at overcoming the huge gaps that have been generated by the pandemic and worsened by that pandemic, and how we are trying to create a special legal regime that will serve in the transition period as we come out of the pandemic and will provide us with the necessary legal instruments. This new draft law, which is currently being studied by the legislature, is something that would allow us to hold remote hearings in perpetuity, obviously in a way that would not affect the basic guarantee of due process. And we also would look at how we could have hearings, issue legal decisions or rulings, and otherwise resolve controversies in the court system virtually. We have also looked at a transition and special regime in courts that would allow us to hold remote hearings and other proceedings. Interpreter notes the extremely poor sound quality and is unable to fully understand the original version from the floor. And these are all fundamental in order to continue providing justice and a solution to any controversies. Interpreter is unable to understand due to the very poor sound quality coming from the floor. In this initiative, we have looked to incorporate this into the law. Interpreter is unable to understand due to the very poor sound quality. Interpreter cannot hear the original version coming from the floor. All of these goals are a show of just how using new technology has benefited the administration of justice, while also generating more timely, safer, and more effective ways of working. This is important for developing our work, as well as a way for us to continually expand this access in the future, in the post-pandemic period. Interpreter is unable to hear given the severe interference with the audio coming from the floor. Interpreter cannot interpret what she cannot hear. Finally, I would like to share the importance of this work in the framework of REMJA. This allows us to share this experience and hear significant, valuable contributions from our colleagues in other countries, what each country has been doing in its own jurisdiction to strengthen access to justice and international legal cooperation. All of this, without a doubt, is vital for human relations, consolidating peace, social cohesion, and allowing us to overcome national and international legal conflicts that can be resolved using this technology. I'd like to salute everyone who is with us at this meeting and wish you most success. Thank you very much. At your orders. Thank you very much to the head of delegation from Chile. And so now I'd like to note that we have a break and we will come back once again at 2 o'clock East Coast time in order to continue speaking with the heads of delegation. Thank you very much. Good afternoon.